Chapter 756. This deacon was obviously not qualified to come into contact with the Jade Lake Saint. Fortunately, they did not have to wait for long. After the deacon used a voice transmission talisman to inform the great elder of the Jade Lake Holy Sect, an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion arrived in just a few moments. He was the great elder of the Jade Lake Holy Sect, Gua Taifeng. His cultivation was at the peak of half-life, and his strength was above that of Elder He and Elder Master Bai. Gua Taifeng appeared, and before Shao Chun could speak to the deacon, he spoke first. This must be the fifth candidate, Shao Chun. Lord Sacred Master invites you in. The Jade Lake Saint already knew that Shao Chun had come to the Jade Lake Holy Sect. Upon hearing Gua Taifeng's words, Shao Chun bowed and followed Gua Taifeng all the way to the cave residence of the Jade Lake Saint. The entire Jade Lake Holy Sect was built on a huge lake surrounded by water. This lake was also known as the Jade Lake. The water of the lake was dark green, and it looked like a piece of jade embedded in the ground from the sky. Under Gua Taifeng's lead, Shao Chun arrived at the cave residence of the Jade Lake Saint. The cave residence of a saint was naturally of a much higher level. They walked all the way to a white rose garden, and Shao Chun finally saw the Jade Lake Saint. However, what surprised Shao Chun was that the Jade Lake Saint was a woman. Moreover, she was an extremely seductive and beautiful woman. Her figure was curvaceous, and her temperament was elegant and tranquil. When Shao Chun and Gua Taifeng arrived, the Jade Lake Saint was tending to the flowers and plants. Gua Taifeng bowed respectfully and said, "Lord Sacred Master, the fifth candidate, Shao Chun, has arrived." In fact, the Jade Lake Saint had met Shao Chun before. Back then, during Shao Chun's coronation ceremony, the Jade Lake Saint had been in the sacred palace. However, because it was only a projection that had descended and Shao Chun had not noticed, the two of them were not very familiar with each other. The Jade Lake Saint stopped what she was doing. She was dressed in a long white dress and had a gentle smile on her face. She gave off the feeling of a spring breeze. The Jade Lake Saint turned to Shao Chun and said with a smile, "It seems that Chun Yu escaped again. Ha, come, I made some tea. Let's talk while we drink." The Jade Lake Saint clearly knew the purpose of Shao Chun's visit. He also knew that this mission should have been completed by Shao Chun. However, it was a pity that this sly fox had thrown this mission to Shao Chun. He did not have the same oppressive force as the other saints. In fact, in front of the Jade Lake Saint, he would instinctively relax completely. However, it would be a big mistake to underestimate the Jade Lake Saint because of this. Shao Chun did not know much about the 16 saints of the ancient sacred sect. In terms of strength, the Jade Lake Saint was definitely in the top 5. However, because of his personality, the Jade Lake Saint rarely fought and did not like to fight. Therefore, he was not as famous as the other saints. Like an ordinary woman, he invited Shao Chun into the bamboo pavilion in the garden. He did not care about his status as a saint and asked Shao Chun to sit down. Then, he personally made a cup of flower tea for Shao Chun. He sat opposite the Jade Lake Saint. As for Elder He, Elder Master Bai, and Gua Taifeng, they stood outside the bamboo pavilion. The Jade Lake Saint smiled and said, "Try it. I personally planted this flower tea. You can't drink it outside." "Thank you, Saint." Hearing this, Shao Chun bowed and thanked him. Then he took a sip. The tea was sweet and fragrant. It was indeed of the highest quality. After taking a sip of the flower tea personally made by the Jade Lake Saint, Shao Chun took the opportunity to ask, "Saint, I'm actually here for the matter of the Sacred sect. Do you have any other information?" The first to discover the traces of the Sacred sect disciples were the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. This mission was also passed down to the ancient sacred sect by the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. Hearing Shao Chun's words, the Jade Lake Saint did not hide anything and immediately told Shao Chun everything he knew. According to the Jade Lake Saint, the traces of the Sacred sect disciples were first discovered in the Heavenly Jade Forest in the Jade Lake Prefecture. The Heavenly Jade Forest was a wetland in the Jade Lake Prefecture. When they first discovered the traces of the Sacred sect disciples, the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect felt that they were looking for something. In order not to alert the enemy, the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect immediately sent back the news. After that, the Jade Lake Sacred Sect also sent a half-saint elder to continue the investigation. Unfortunately, the Sacred Sect disciples still managed to escape in the end. However, it was not completely fruitless. According to the information currently available, the reason why the Sacred Sect disciples entered the Jade Lake Prefecture was to search for something. Moreover, various signs indicated that there should be some kind of connection between the Sacred Sect disciples and the Lin family of the Jade Lake Prefecture. It could even be boldly speculated that the Sacred Sect disciples might be hiding in the Lin family of the Jade Lake Prefecture. Speaking of the Lin family of the Jade Lake Prefecture, it could be regarded as a large family in the Jade Lake Prefecture. It was very powerful. Moreover, many of its clansmen held important positions in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect, such as half-saint elders, deacons, and disciples of various levels. Even 2 of the 10 direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect came from the Lin family. According to the Jade Lake Saint, as long as they kept a close eye on the Lin family, they should be able to find the whereabouts of the Sacred Sect disciples. At the very least, they could find some clues. However, they could not be careless if they wanted to successfully capture the Sacred Sect disciples. They should have transmitting glyphs on them. Once they alerted the enemy, they were likely to escape. Therefore, if Xiao Chun wanted to make a move, he would only have one chance. He had to make sure that he hit the target with one strike. Otherwise, it would be more difficult later. He explained the whole thing to Xiao Chun in detail. At the end of the story, Azure Lake Saint added, "In this operation, the Jade Lake Sacred Sect will fully cooperate with you. You can also mobilize the disciples in the sect at will." The Jade Lake Saint's voice was very pleasant. After hearing his words, Xiao Chun stood up and thanked him. Seeing this, the Jade Lake Saint smiled slightly and said, "You can go and rest first. As for the Lin family, the elders of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect have been keeping an eye on them. If we want to capture the Sacred Sect disciples, we still need to come up with a perfect plan. We can't be too hasty." The Jade Lake Sacred Sect arranged a residence for Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun did not refuse. It was obviously not advisable to act rashly. Therefore, Xiao Chun still needed some time to think about how to capture the Sacred Sect disciples. After chatting with the Jade Lake Saint for a while, Xiao Chun was led by Guo Taifeng to his temporary residence. A separate courtyard was specially arranged for Xiao Chun. This was where Xiao Chun would stay in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect for the next period of time. Just as Xiao Chun settled down, news about him gradually spread among the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. Hearing that the prospective holy son of the ancient sacred sect had arrived, the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were naturally extremely respectful and curious. They all wanted to see what kind of person the prospective holy son of the ancient sacred sect was like. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 757. The disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were both curious and respectful towards the prospective holy son of the ancient sacred sect. Therefore, although many disciples wanted to see Xiao Chun's true appearance, no one dared to disturb Xiao Chun. After staying in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect for the time being, Xiao Chun secretly thought about how to deal with this matter in the next 2 days. Facing the disciples of the Sacred Sect, the saints obviously wouldn't act. As for the reason, it could be said that they didn't want to, but it could also be said that it was a matter of face. Thinking about it, it made sense. Just a few disciples of the Sacred Sect required the saints of the ancient sacred sect to act. If word got out, wouldn't it mean that the ancient sacred sect had no successor? The more powerful a sect was, the more they cared about their face. Since the saints of the Sacred Sect didn't appear, the saints of the ancient sacred sect naturally wouldn't appear either. The matter of the disciples would naturally be settled by the disciples. It was because of this that the ancient sacred sect had issued this mission. Therefore, it was impossible to rely on the saints for this mission. Moreover, Xiao Chun didn't want the saints of the ancient sacred sect to intervene, because if they did, Xiao Chun would have a lot of calculations to make. Don't forget that this time, Xiao Chun still wanted to find out about Gu Lingyao from the disciples of the Sacred Sect. If there were saints accompanying him, how could Xiao Chen ask? Not to mention extorting a confession. Saints couldn't be relied on. Therefore, after meeting with the Jade Lake Saint, the Jade Lake Saint didn't show up for the next 2 days. He even asked Gua Taifeng to report all the information about the disciples of the Sacred sect directly to Xiao Chen. There was no need to tell him anymore. It could be said that the Jade Lake Saint had completely removed himself from the matter. Every day, news about the Jade Lake Lin clan would constantly be passed to Xiao Chen. There had always been people secretly monitoring the Lin clan, but so far, there was still no news about the disciples of the Sacred sect. Regarding this, Xiao Chen also decided to bide his time for the time being. If the disciples of the Sacred sect were really related to the Lin family, then Xiao Chen believed that there would be a day when the Lin family would be exposed. That would be the time for him to take action. As for now, it was better to remain silent than to take action. The best choice was to wait for the right time to come. Having made up his mind, Xiao Chen calmed down and began to practice the 9 thunderclap swords and the shadow-bearing sword finger, 2 upper-grade heaven-level martial arts techniques, in the Jade Lake Holy Sect. In the ancient sacred sect, Xiao Chen didn't have much free time. However, in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect, Xiao Chen had a rare moment of peace. He had enough time to cultivate the 2 heaven-class upper martial skills. As for the matter of the ancient sacred sect, Xiao Chen wasn't worried at all. He wasn't afraid that he would cause any trouble. After all, Chen Yu was still there. Although he was lazy, he couldn't just stand by and watch he cause trouble. Therefore, there was definitely no problem in the ancient sacred sect. 5 days passed in a row. Xiao Chen cultivated in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. Unfortunately, the heaven-class upper martial skills weren't so easy to cultivate. 5 days was almost equivalent to the blink of an eye for Xiao Chen. It seems that it will take at least a few months for me to master these 2 heaven-grade upper-level martial arts techniques, Xiao Chen murmured with a helpless smile. It took several months to cultivate these 2 heaven-class upper martial skills, and this was only the initial mastery. It was hard to say how long it would take to reach the transformation stage. However, this was normal. It would be strange if heaven-class upper martial skills were so easy to cultivate. Moreover, Xiao Chen was confident that he could grasp the initial mastery in a few months. This was already heaven-defying enough. It should be known that many people might not succeed even if they were given heaven-class upper martial skills. This was the difference in talent. While enjoying the rare peace, Xiao Chen waited for news from the disciples of the Sacred sect. While Xiao Chen was cultivating in seclusion, he didn't see the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect for several days. Finally, the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect couldn't bear it anymore. On this day, 3 direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect took the initiative to visit. Xiao Chen, who was cultivating in the backyard, heard Elder He say that there were direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect who wanted to see him. He smiled and didn't refuse. He immediately ordered Elder He to invite them in. The 3 of them were personal disciples of the Jade Lake Holy Clan, and they had all brought their attendants with them. There were 8 of them in total. However, Xiao Chen did not expect to see 2 old acquaintances in this group, Feng Lingye and his wife, Su Jin. When Xiao Chen saw the 2 of them, he smiled and said, "Brother Feng, Miss Su, I didn't expect to see you here." Feng Lingye was once one of the 10 prides of the heavenly Chun continent. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, Feng Lingye and Su Jin clearly didn't expect Xiao Chen to be the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect. After a short moment of astonishment, Feng Lingye spoke in surprise. "Xiao Chen, so you're the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect." Seeing that the 3 of them were old acquaintances, the others who came with Feng Lingye were also astonished. However, they soon sat together and chatted. Of course, when facing Xiao Chen, they couldn't help but feel nervous, including Feng Lingye and Su Jin. After all, Xiao Chen was now the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect. The difference in status was too great. In front of Xiao Chen, it was natural for them to feel pressured. Fortunately, Xiao Chen was an amiable person. After chatting for a while, everyone gradually relaxed. This time, There were a total of 3 personal disciples who came, and Feng Lingye was one of them. Feng Lingye had also successfully become one of the personal disciples of the Jade Lake Holy Sect after cultivating in the sect for so many years. Perhaps because Feng Lingye and Xiao Chen knew each other, the other 2 direct disciples had been secretly hinting at Feng Lingye. In the end, Feng Lingye had no choice but to look at Xiao Chen and speak with an awkward expression. Brother Xiao Chen, actually, we came this time with a request. Everyone is very curious and longing for the sage to be. So, according to Feng Lingye, because the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were very curious and worshipped Xiao Chen, the 10 direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect wanted to hold a martial gathering and invite Xiao Chen to participate. At the same time, the 10 direct disciples also wanted to exchange a few moves with Xiao Chen. They wanted to see how big the gap was between them and the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get close to the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect. Therefore, the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect didn't want to refuse. However, because they didn't get Xiao Chen's permission beforehand, they were so nervous. At this moment, they came to visit in hopes of getting Xiao Chen's permission so that the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect could get close to the sage-to-be of the ancient sacred sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 758. Candidates and saints were the idols of the younger generation in the ancient saint state. Feng Lingye looked at Xiao Chen expectantly, waiting for his answer. He was a little nervous and a little excited at the same time. Not just the others, even Feng Lingye wanted to fight with Xiao Chen. Although he knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, Feng Lingye also wanted to see how big the gap was between him and Xiao Chen. After all, after coming to the Tiana continent, Feng Lingye had not slacked off in his cultivation. Facing Feng Lingye's expectant gaze, Xiao Chen hesitated for a moment, then nodded happily. Okay, then you make the arrangements. I will go when the time comes. In the end, he agreed to Feng Lingye's request. Hearing this, everyone was overjoyed. They didn't dare to disturb Xiao Chen too much and quickly left. But before leaving, Feng Lingye told Xiao Chen that there was no need to prepare anything. The martial gathering would be held in 3 days, and it would be held in the Azure Lake restaurant. Since the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect had the cool breeze in, the Jade Lake Sacred Sect naturally had the Jade Lake restaurant as well. It was one of the favorite places for the disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. Of course, the price of a Jade Lake restaurant wasn't something that ordinary disciples could afford. It was very expensive, but this time, for the sake of Xiao Chen, the 10 direct disciples had joined forces and booked the entire Azure Lake restaurant for the martial gathering in 3 days. When the news spread, it naturally set off an uproar in the Azure Lake Holy Sect. All the disciples wanted to participate and see the Holy Sun of the ancient Holy Sect with their own eyes. Unfortunately, the Azure Lake Holy Sect had more than 100,000 disciples, so it was naturally impossible for all of them to participate. In the end, the 10 direct disciples discussed together and decided on 1,000 spots. They would choose the participating disciples through invitation letters. There were only a total of 1,000 spots and 1,000 invitation letters. For a time, these 1,000 invitation letters became the hottest thing in the Azure Lake Holy Sect. Apart from the 10 direct disciples, all the other disciples dreamed of these invitation letters. They didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money to obtain one. 3 days wasn't a long time, and in these 3 days, the 1,000 invitation letters were quickly snatched up. Of course, almost all of them were taken by the core disciples. Only a small number of ordinary disciples were lucky enough to obtain these invitation letters. The spots had been confirmed, so the disciples with the invitation letters came to the Azure Lake restaurant early in the morning, impatiently waiting for the martial gathering to begin. As for the disciples without an invitation letters, they didn't give up and directly surrounded by Azure Lake restaurant. For a time, the entire Azure Lake restaurant was packed with people. Time slowly passed, and at dusk, the 10 direct disciples of the Azure Lake Holy Sect also arrived. Everyone was waiting for Xiao Chun to appear. Time passed by minute. In the restaurant, the 1,000 disciples were anxiously waiting. It was during this anxious wait that suddenly a burst of exclamations came from outside the restaurant. Hearing the sound, the 10 direct disciples and the 1,000 disciples with the invitation letters immediately came outside the door. From afar, they saw Xiao Chun, who was dressed in an ordinary white robe, slowly walking through the crowd towards the Azure Lake restaurant. Although he was surrounded by people all the way, Xiao Chun appeared to be at ease. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, no one was able to get within 3 meters of Xiao Chun. Just like that, Xiao Chun slowly walked toward the Azure Lake restaurant. Looking at Xiao Chun, the faces of the 10 personal disciples revealed a look of longing. This kind of demeanor was probably something that only the chosen and the chosen could possess. The 10 direct disciples all revealed longing looks, but there was one person who didn't have much of a change in her eyes. There was even a faint trace of disdain in her eyes. This person was also one of the 10 direct disciples of the Azure Lake Holy Sect. Her name was Jiyu. She was a young girl and ranked 7th among the 10 direct disciples of the Azure Lake Holy Sect. Unlike the others, when facing Xiao Chun, although Jiyu tried her best to show her longing and admiration, it was all just on the surface. At least, there was a clear difference between her and the others. Passing through the crowd, Xiao Chun arrived in front of the 10 direct disciples. He smiled and nodded at Feng Lingye, then said, "I'd like to thank everyone for your kindness." Hearing Xiao Chun's words, the head of the 10 direct disciples of the Azure Lake Holy Sect, Zhang Buin, respectfully replied, "The Holy Sun is too polite. To be honest, it is a great honor for us to be able to see the Holy Sun's demeanor." As the head of the 10 direct disciples, Zhang Buiyun naturally became the representative of everyone. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, accompanied by everyone, Xiao Chun entered the Azure Lake restaurant like a moon surrounded by stars. The Jade Lake restaurant had obviously made some preparations for today's martial gathering. After passing through the front hall, they arrived at the main courtyard. At this moment, tables and chairs had already been set up in the main courtyard. Furthermore, there was an arena right in the middle, which was obviously for everyone to spar with. Everyone took their seats according to the order of their seats. Xiao Chun naturally sat at the same table as the 10 direct disciples, right in front of the arena. It was also the best spot. A beautiful maid served wine and side dishes, and the banquet began. However, the banquet seemed a little uneasy, perhaps because of Xiao Chun. Moreover, almost everyone's eyes were fixed on Xiao Chun. Some of the female disciples couldn't help but look at Xiao Chun with glowing eyes. It felt as if they wanted to melt Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun also felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. He glanced at the 10 personal disciples at the same table and said with a smile, "Don't worry. Everyone, there's no need to be like this. Just be normal. If you're too restrained, this banquet will be tasteless." Xiao Chun also didn't like this feeling. Hearing this, Zhang Buiyun was the first to regain his senses. He took the initiative to raise his cup and said, "What the prospective saint says is right. In that case, let us toast to the prospective saint." Everyone raised their cups and downed it in one gulp. As the wine went down their stomachs and Xiao Chun didn't give off the slightest feeling of arrogance, the atmosphere gradually relaxed. It was especially so for the table that Xiao Chun was sitting at. The 10 personal disciples were not ordinary people either. After getting over their initial nervousness, they chatted with Xiao Chun about everything under the sun. Of course, the ones who spoke the most during this period were Xiao Chun and Feng Lingye. It was also because Feng Lingye and Xiao Chun were old acquaintances that when the seating arrangements were made, Feng Lingye was arranged to sit on Xiao Chun's right, while Zhang Buiyun sat on Xiao Chun's left. As for the others, they were seated according to their rankings. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 759. While chatting with the top 10 personal disciples, Xiao Chun appeared to be very approachable from the beginning to the end. He did not seem to be arrogant at all, but he gave people a feeling that he was unapproachable. This was something that Zhang Buiyun and the others had experienced firsthand. Only Feng Lingye had not. This was normal, although Xiao Chun didn't rely on his status and strength to give people a feeling of arrogance. Xiao Chen's feelings towards Zhang Buiyun and the others were only superficial. There was an insurmountable gap between the two sides, so it was destined that there wouldn't be any deep anxiety. As for Feng Lingye, it was because the two of them had known each other since the heavenly Qin continent. Therefore, even though Xiao Chen's strength and status had undergone earth-shaking changes, the feelings between the two still hadn't changed. This was also what Xiao Chen hoped for. The banquet continued. As time passed, gradually, disciples began to come onto the stage to exchange pointers. After every battle, these disciples couldn't help but look at Xiao Chun, as if they wanted to know if the Holy Sun had taken them seriously. Knowing the feelings of these disciples, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded at the end of every battle to encourage these disciples. One by one, the disciples came onto the stage to exchange pointers. In the end, it was already late at night. At this time, no one came onto the stage. Everyone's eyes were on Xiao Chun and the 10 direct disciples. Obviously, the final highlight was coming. Xiao Chun and the 10 direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect would exchange pointers. Sensing everyone's gazes, Xiao Chun consciously stood up and looked at Zhang Buiyun, Feng Lingye, and the others at the same table as him. He smiled and said, "Everyone, allow everyone to be arrogant for a while. How about I challenge everyone at the same time?" He already knew that the 10 direct disciples wanted to exchange pointers with him. Before coming, Xiao Chun had thought about it. It would be too troublesome to challenge them one by one, so he might as well challenge them all at once. This would save him a lot of trouble. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhang Buiyun and the rest were stunned at first, but they quickly agreed. This was the benefit of one's status. Saying the same words with different statuses would give off a completely different feeling. Challenging the top 10 personal disciples at the same time. If it were anyone else, they would only think that they were arrogant and courting death. However, when these words came out of Xiao Chen's mouth, no one had such thoughts because Xiao Chen was qualified to say these words. Zhang Buiyun and the rest had no objections. Subsequently, everyone stepped onto the arena at the same time. When they saw Xiao Chen standing proudly in the middle of the arena and the 10 direct disciples surrounding Xiao Chen, the surrounding disciples became excited. Someone even couldn't help but speak out. Is the prospective saint planning to fight 1 against 10? To challenge the 10 personal disciples at the same time? Is this the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect? Among those of the same generation, apart from the prospective saint and the holy son, I'm afraid no one would dare to do such a thing. Xiao Chun wanting to fight the 10 personal disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect at the same time immediately stirred up the emotions of everyone present. Everyone stared at the arena without blinking, afraid that they would miss the slightest detail. Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Buiyun said, "Be careful, prospective saint." "Come," Xiao Chen replied with a matter-of-fact expression. He didn't even take out the ink dragon sword. After all, Zhang Buiyun and the other personal disciples were only at the Dao confirmation realm. If Xiao Chen still had to take out the ink dragon sword to deal with them, it would be too much of a bully. As soon as Xiao Chen finished speaking, Zhang Buiyun took the initiative to attack. At the same time, Feng Lingye and the rest moved at the same time. The 10 personal disciples attacked Xiao Chen from 10 different lines of defense. Facing the attacks of the 10 people, Xiao Chen took a step forward and skillfully dodged the attacks of Zhang Buiyun and the others. In a flash, he appeared in front of one of the personal disciples. Looking at the disciple's fierce punch, Xiao Chen had a faint smile on his face and casually flicked his finger. Seeing that Xiao Chen had actually flicked his finger, the personal disciple was puzzled. A flick of the finger? What could a flick of the finger do? Could it be that it could hurt people? The personal disciple couldn't help but think. But soon, his expression changed drastically. Xiao Chen flicked his finger. It looked like an ordinary flick of the finger, but in Xiao Chen's hands, its power was not inferior to a martial technique. A sword aura flashed by and instantly hit the personal disciple's abdomen. Immediately, the personal disciple was sent flying. A mere flick of the finger had defeated a personal disciple. Then, under the siege of the 10 personal disciples, Xiao Qian's figure gracefully began to counterattack. They originally thought that the 10 of them would be able to fight against Xiao Qian. But unfortunately, in the face of Xiao Qian, Zhang Buyun and the other personal disciples didn't have much strength to fight back. They were the personal disciples, but now they were like powerless chicks. One by one, they were sent flying out of the stage by Xiao Qian. The difference in strength was simply too great. To be honest, the personal disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were definitely not as strong as the personal disciples of the ancient sacred sect. And Xiao Qian, who was able to become the quasi-holy sun, was naturally not someone they could compare to. Every strike was controlled so as not to injure anyone. In just a few dozen breaths of time, only 2 of the 10 direct disciples were left on the stage. One was Zhang Buyun, and the other was a young girl, Ji Yu. First, she appeared in front of Zhang Buyun in a flash. Facing Xiao Qian's attack, Zhang Buyun gritted his teeth and fiercely slapped his palm. In response, Xiao Qian casually pointed his finger and displayed the pure June sword finger. A golden sword light flashed and instantly shattered Zhang Buyun's attack. Then it fiercely hit Zhang Buyun's body. Zhang Buyun was sent flying. Zhang Buyun was also sent flying out of the stage. In this way, only Ji Yu was left in the stage. Taking a step forward, her figure appeared in front of Ji Yu like a ghost. Facing Xiao Qian, Ji Yu sent out a palm. Seeing this, Xiao Qian didn't dodge and sent out a palm of his own. Their palms collided, and in a flash, Ji Yu was sent flying. In 100 breaths' time, the 10 personal disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were defeated. However, standing on the stage, a strange light flashed in Xiao Qian's eyes. The reason for this strange light was because of Ji Yu. When Xiao Qian and Ji Yu's palms collided, he vaguely sensed that this girl seemed to be deliberately restraining her strength. Or rather, she was hiding her cultivation. Xiao Qian was a little puzzled, but he didn't say much. Xiao Qian cupped his fists and smiled at Zhang Buyun, Feng Lingye, and the others who were below the stage. Everyone, thank you for letting me win. Hearing Xiao Qian's words, Zhang Buyun and the others respectfully returned the greeting and sighed from the bottom of their hearts. The quasi-holy sun's battle strength is amazing. Today, we've really learned something. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 760. The 10 direct disciples of the Jade Lake Sacred Sect were all defeated in less than 100 breaths of time. After witnessing the entire process, the disciples present could be said to have truly witnessed the strength of the ancient sacred sect's quasi-holy sun. Previously, many people might have thought that although the quasi-holy sun of the ancient sacred sect was strong, there was a limit to how strong he could be compared to the 10 direct disciples. However, after this battle, no one would think so anymore. This was no longer a matter of whether there was a limit or not. The gap between the two was already a gap in level. To put it bluntly, the direct disciples and the quasi-holy sun were no longer on the same level. The 10 direct disciples had joined forces, but they couldn't even force out Xiao Qian's true strength. After this battle, the disciples' dread and longing for Xiao Qian had deepened by another 10%. At the same time, they vaguely understood why the quasi-holy sun and holy sun of the ancient sacred sect were like gods to them. It wasn't just because of their status. Even without their status, the strength of the quasi-holy sun and holy sun was enough to make the world respect them like gods. After the battle, it was time to chat and drink. However, at this time, Xiao Qian clearly wasn't too interested in the others. His pair of eyes were silently watching Ji Yu. After the battle, just now, Xiao Qian paid special attention to Ji Yu. Of course, Xiao Qian's gaze was very obscure and wasn't noticed by Ji Yu. The banquet lasted until late at night. Then the crowd dispersed. Xiao Qian was personally sent back to his residence by the 10 direct disciples. When he returned to his residence, Elder He and Elder Master Bai immediately came to greet him. Seeing this, Xiao Qian didn't speak nonsense. He just said to the 2 elders indifferently, I still have some matters to attend to. You two elders stay in the courtyard and wait for me." After saying that, without waiting for Elder Masterby to reply, Xiao Chen's figure moved and disappeared. No one would have thought that Xiao Chun, who had just returned to his residence, would suddenly come back. At this time, Zhang Buyun, Feng Lingya, and the rest of the 10 direct disciples had also returned to their own residences. Jade Lake's sacred sect soon became quiet in the middle of the night. Few disciples could be seen. Under the cover of the dark night, a black shadow flashed by and headed for Jiyu's mansion. No one noticed the presence of this shadow. At the same time, Jiyu returned to his residence with an entirely different expression. If Jiyu gave people the impression that he was quiet and elegant before, he now gave people the impression that he was arrogant and cold. Sitting in the room, Jiyu revealed a disdainful sneer and muttered softly, "Ancient sacred sect's prospective holy son. Heh, he's simply missing his teeth." A mere initial Dao Gate realm cultivator can become a prospective holy son. It seems like the ancient sacred sect is declining more and more. With this kind of strength, any prospective holy son in the sacred Yin sect can easily defeat him. The prospective holy son of the ancient sacred sect that Jiyu mentioned was undoubtedly Xiao Chun. Moreover, she even mentioned the sacred Yin sect, which inevitably made people suspicious. It was impossible for a direct disciple of the Jade Lake sacred sect to be related to the sacred Yin sect. Unless after a round of disdain, Jiyu's smile slowly disappeared. Then, his eyes flickered with a cold light as he said, "But since the prospective holy son of the ancient sacred sect has already come to the Jade Lake sacred sect, it seems like I still have to inform senior sister to speed up the process. Otherwise, it's hard to avoid any accidents." After saying that, Jiyu took out a sound transmission talisman and prepared to use it. But at this moment, the door opened and Jiyu abruptly stood up as if facing a great enemy. He looked outside the door with a cold expression and shouted in a deep voice, "Who is it?" Following Jiyu's question, Xiao Chun, who was dressed in white, appeared outside the door and walked into the room unhurriedly with a faint smile on his face. "Junior sister Jiyu, who are you going to send a sound transmission talisman to?" Jiyu stared at the sound transmission talisman in Jiyu's hand indifferently. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, a trace of panic flashed across Jiyu's eyes, but she quickly forced herself to calm down. "Prospective holy son, isn't this my private matter? Moreover, I'm afraid that people will misunderstand your visit in the middle of the night. If there's nothing else, I'm going to rest." Jiyu directly ordered him to leave, but Xiao Chun acted as if he didn't hear it. In fact, Xiao Chun had been hiding in the dark from the beginning. Xiao Chun also heard Jiyu's words clearly. A direct disciple of the Jade Lake sacred sect actually mentioned the sacred Yin sect. There was only one possibility, and that was that Jiyu wasn't the real Jiyu, but someone in disguise. And that person's identity was most likely someone from a sacred Yin sect. Xiao Chun was experienced in disguising someone's identity. After all, he had done such a thing before. Ever since he fought with Jiyu and discovered that she was hiding her strength, Xiao Chun had always been suspicious of Jiyu. Therefore, after the banquet ended, Xiao Chun first asked everyone to send him back and let them think that he was resting. Then, he secretly followed Jiyu all the way here to see what secrets she had. Xiao Chun really gained a lot from this trip. This Jiyu is very likely someone from the sacred Yin sect in disguise. This was definitely a big gain. However, in addition to his excitement, Xiao Chun also vaguely guessed that since someone from the sacred Yin sect had already infiltrated the Jade Lake sacred sect, then the Jade Lake sacred sect series of actions were probably under the sacred Yin sect's nose from beginning to end, including the matter of the Jade Lake sacred sect secretly sending people to spy on the Lin family. Everything was under pressure from the sacred Yin sect. It was no wonder that after such a long time, the Lin family still hadn't gained anything. It seemed that the sacred Yin sect had long been on guard. Fortunately, Xiao Chun keenly sensed that something was wrong with Jiyu today. Otherwise, he would really have been kept in the dark and foolishly waited in the Jade Lake sacred sect. In such a situation, even if Xiao Chun waited until death in the Jade Lake sacred sect, he was afraid that he wouldn't gain anything. The final result was very likely that the Sacredine sect had achieved their goal and calmly retreated, while he waited bitterly in the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. As for the Jade Lake Sacred Sect, they were still foolishly monitoring the Lin family. Previously, Xiao Chun didn't realize that someone from the Sacredine sect had actually infiltrated the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. But now, since Xiao Chun had guessed all this and even caught Ji Yu, then the plan naturally had to change. No longer foolishly waiting for news from the Lin family, he would first take down Ji Yu in front of him and then think of a way to pry the information he wanted from him. With this in mind, Xiao Chun approached Ji Yu step by step. In the face of Xiao Chun's approach, Ji Yu also kept retreating and said with a dignified face, "Prospective Holy Son, what do you mean by this? This is the Jade Lake Sacred Sect. If you want to do something despicable, I'm afraid that you will end up ruining your own reputation. Prospective Holy Son, please think twice before you act." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 761. Facing Xiao Chun, Ji Yu is incomparably nervous. Upon hearing her words, Xiao Chun continued to approach her step by step. At the same time, the smile on his face became increasingly sinister. "Do what? What do you want me to do?" "You." Ji Yu was at a loss for words. She initially wanted to make Xiao Chun back off. After all, a man and a woman were alone in a room in the middle of the night. Perhaps anyone would have scruples about it. However, Xiao Chun apparently wasn't one of them. What a joke. At this moment, Xiao Chun was almost certain that the Ji Yu in front of him was an impostor and was likely related to the Sacredine sect. If that was the case, how could Xiao Chun let him go? To put it bluntly, the fake Ji Yu in front of him was the breakthrough. Upon seeing that the fake Ji Yu was speechless, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "Now, are you going to follow me willingly, or do you want me to forcefully take you away? Or perhaps, do you want to call for help? Then, you can frame me for doing something inappropriate to you." After all, this wasn't the place for questioning. Therefore, Xiao Chun decided to bring this fake Ji Yu back to his residence before questioning her. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's words, the fake Ji Yu didn't say a word. However, she had already begun to gather her strength and was ready to go all out. Xiao Chun's guess was right. This fake Ji Yu was indeed a disciple of the Sacredine sect. As a disciple of the Sacredine sect, she naturally wouldn't allow herself to be captured without a fight. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, she had been looking for an opportunity to escape. But it was a pity that from the moment Xiao Chun appeared until now, Xiao Chun had unintentionally blocked her escape route. If she wanted to escape, she could only forcefully fight and find an opportunity to break through Xiao Chun's blockade. As the distance between the two got closer and closer, when Xiao Chun was less than a meter away from the fake Ji Yu, all of a sudden, the fake Ji Yu jumped up. The storage ring on his hand flashed, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He fiercely stabbed the sword at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun didn't panic in the slightest in the face of this sudden attack. A cold glint flashed through his eyes. He immediately stretched out his hand and caught the fake Ji Yu's sword with just 2 fingers. The fake Ji Yu wasn't weak and was even stronger than Zhang Buiyun. However, even if he was stronger than Zhang Buiyun, he was still nothing in front of Xiao Chun. Although Xiao Chun might be weaker than the other prospective holy sons of the ancient sacred sect, due to the difference in cultivation, Xiao Chun was still a prospective holy son when facing a direct disciple. There was still an insurmountable gap between the two. Xiao Chun easily blocked the sword. Holding the sword with 2 fingers, he said indifferently, "It seems that you don't want to go back with me. Since that's the case, I have no choice but to fight." As he spoke, Xiao Chun pointed with his finger, and a golden sword ray flashed by. The Chun Jun finger sword was instantly performed. Faced with the attack of the golden sword ray, the fake Qi Lu had no choice but to abandon her sword and dodge. He abandoned the sword in his hand. But it was a pity that even though the fake Ji Yu reacted immediately, he still couldn't resist the pure Jun sword finger at such a close distance. The golden blade ray penetrated the fake Ji Yu's shoulder, leaving a bloody hole. Seizing this opportunity, Xiao Chun leaped forward and blocked the fake Ji-Yu's escape route. Then he grabbed the fake Ji-Yu by the neck and lifted him up. Xiao Chun had successfully subdued the fake Ji-Yu. No matter how hard the fake Ji-Yu struggled, she was unable to break free. Without saying a word, Xiao Chun directly sealed the fake Ji-Yu's cultivation and brought her back to his residence under the cover of the night. On the way back to his residence, Elder He and Elder Master Bai, who had been waiting, were puzzled when they saw Xiao Chun bringing a woman back. Seeing this, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "I caught someone from the Sacredine sect." Without waiting for the two elders to reply, Xiao Chun directly brought the fake Ji-Yu back to his room. After closing the door, Xiao Chun threw the fake Ji-Yu on the ground and said indifferently, "Now, you can tell me now. Can you tell me now? Tell me who you are and why you sneaked into the Jade Lake Sacred Clan." Sitting on the chair, Ji-Yu calmly looked at the woman in front of him. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the fake Ji-Yu said, "Impossible. Kill me if you can." He looked as if he would rather die than submit. Xiao Chen smiled slightly when he saw that. He had expected such an answer long ago. Since she could sneak into the Jade Lake Sacred Sect, the fake Ji-Yu naturally wouldn't be a weakling. It was obviously impossible to get information out of her so easily. With a smile on his face, Xiao Chen got up and walked to the front of the fake Ji-Yu. Squatting down, he raised the fake Ji-Yu's chin and said with a cold glint in his eyes, "Don't worry, I have plenty of time to play with you. Moreover, I have many ways to deal with people who are stubborn. I just hope that you won't surrender so quickly. Kill me if you can." The fake Ji-Yu snorted coldly when she heard Xiao Chen's words. "Kill you? You think too much. Although I, Xiao Chun, am not a gentleman, I'm not a ruthless person. My purpose is very simple. I just want to know something from you. But it seems that you don't intend to tell me. Then let's get to the point." Xiao Chun asked Senior He and Elder Master Bai to prepare a bucket of hot water and bring it into the room. The hot water constantly emitted a faint mist. After walking around the wooden bucket, Xiao Chun came to the fake Ji-Yu and said with a smile, "Have you heard of a kind of demon beast called the snow worm? This kind of demon beast is weak and can be said to be no different from a wild beast. However, the snow worm is naturally afraid of heat. Once it encounters an extremely hot situation, the snow worm will instinctively find a hole to crawl into." Xiao Chen said indifferently and took a snow worm from Elder Master Bai. The snow worm was a very low-level demon beast. Its whole body was snow white, but its body was sticky and looked very disgusting. Looking at the snake-like snow worm wriggling in Xiao Chen's hand, the fake Ji-Yu's eyes flashed with a touch of horror. Her tone also softened a little. What are you trying to do?" "Oh, nothing much. I just want to invite you and the snow worm to take a bath together. There's a bucket of hot water here. If you and the snow worm are put in at the same time, where do you think the snow worm will find a place to hide?" Xiao Chan said indifferently after hearing the fake Ji-Yu's words. Xiao Chen's voice was very calm, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder in the fake Ji-Yu's ears. The fake Ji-Yu wasn't afraid of torture, but the thought of taking a bath together with the snow worm and how the snow worm would try its best to crawl into a hole when the water was warmed up made her expression change. For a moment, the fake Ji-Yu's expression changed drastically. She never thought that Xiao Chan would come up with such a vicious method. It was no exaggeration to say that this method would work on any woman. It could make any woman tremble in fear. Looking at the constantly changing expression of the fake Ji-Yu, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "All right, let's begin. Elder Master Bai, Senior He, take off her clothes and throw them in. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 762. Xiao Chen's methods were dishonorable, especially when he used them on women. Xiao Chen didn't deny this point, but Xiao Chun didn't feel that it was shameful. The reason was simple. Firstly, he wasn't a gentleman and never wanted to be one. Secondly, the fake Ji-Yu was an enemy, and since she was an enemy, Xiao Chun naturally had to achieve his goal regardless of whether she was a man or a woman. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with using some small tricks. If he were to show mercy to the fake Ji-Yu because she was a woman, Xiao Chen would think that he was an idiot. As a matter of fact, Xiao Chen had other ways to obtain information from the fake GU apart from using this method. However, it would take a lot more time. And now, Xiao Chen didn't know the sacred insect's purpose in sneaking into the ancient holy province. Therefore, he didn't have that much time to waste on the fake GU. Therefore, he could only use the simplest and most direct method. Along with Xiao Chen's command, Senior Black and Elder Master by strode toward the fake GU. Just as the two elders were about to attack, the fake GU finally gritted his teeth and said, "What do you want to know?" The fake GU couldn't take it anymore at the thought of having to take a bath with the snow worm and what would happen later. He slumped to the ground weakly and seemed to have given up on resisting. How hateful! At that moment, the fake GU cursed Xiao Chen in his mind. As a man, Xiao Chen's methods were simply too despicable. He actually did such a thing to a woman. She secretly cursed Xiao Chen for being shameless, but Xiao Chen naturally didn't care. Hearing the fake GU's words, Xiao Chen smiled, and the spiritual force in his body surged. He tore the snow worm into pieces and then looked at the fake GU with a smile. In that case, shouldn't we be more sincere? At the very least, shouldn't you show your true appearance? Knowing that the fake GU's face wasn't the woman's, the fake GU hesitated for a moment before returning to his original appearance. His appearance slowly changed, and in an instant, a stunning young woman appeared before Xiao Chen. Although she couldn't compare to Gu Ling Yao, Qin Shu, or Fairy of 100 Flowers, she was indeed much prettier than the previous GU. Xiao Chen smiled and sat down on a chair. He looked at the beautiful young woman and said, "I didn't expect you to be such a beauty. All right, tell me your true identity and your purpose in sneaking into the Jade Lake Sacred sect." Facing Xiao Chen's question, the fake GU was very honest this time. Her real name was Wu Dai. Just as Xiao Chen had guessed, she was a disciple of the Sacred sect and a core disciple at that. As for her purpose in sneaking into the Jade Lake Sacred sect, it was to secretly monitor the movements of the Jade Lake Sacred sect and inform the other disciples of the Sacred sect in advance so that they could be vigilant at all times. She answered Xiao Chen's question truthfully, just as Xiao Chen had guessed. Hearing this, Xiao Chen asked, "Then where is the real GU now?" "I'm already here, so where do you think GU is?" Wu Dai sneered. Hearing this, Xiao Chen sighed. GU had clearly been killed. Although Xiao Chen had already guessed this, he couldn't help but feel pity for GU after hearing the answer. Since GU had been killed, Xiao Chen sighed and asked, "How many people did the Sacred sect send to the Jade Lake Mansion? How strong are they? What is your purpose?" This was the question that Xiao Chen was most concerned about. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's question, Wu Dai fell silent. Obviously, this was a secret of the Sacred sect, and she didn't dare to reveal it. Seeing that Wu Dai had once again fallen into hesitation, Xiao Chen sneered, "What? Do you still need to think? How about I let you take a bath with the snowworm? That way, you'll have enough time to think. Don't worry, I'm a very patient person." Shameless. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wu Dai cursed inwardly. However, she still chose to give up resistance. She really couldn't accept taking a bath with the snowworm. Wu Dai cursed softly. As soon as she finished speaking, she told Xiao Chen everything she knew with a haggard face. It wasn't that she wanted to, but that she didn't have a choice. From Wu Dai's words, Xiao Chen learned that there were 8 people from the Sacred sect who had infiltrated the Jade Lake Mansion. Among them, there was a saintess-to-be leading the team, 2 personal disciples, and 5 core disciples. Xiao Chen was inwardly shocked by such an elite lineup. After all, the ancient sacred sect's report stated that a personal disciple of the Sacred sect had infiltrated the Jade Lake Mansion. However, it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. The personal disciple was merely a follower. The real protagonist was the saintess-to-be. It seemed that the Sacred sect's purpose this time wasn't small. Sure enough, under Xiao Chen's questioning, Wu Dai finally said that the Sacred sect had sent them to infiltrate the Jade Lake Mansion in order to destroy the veins of heaven of the ancient sacred province. There were a total of 4 veins of heaven in the Tiana continent. They were located in the 4 great provinces. It could be said that these four veins of heaven were the lifelines of the four great provinces. At the same time, they were also the lifelines of the ancient sacred sect and the sacredine sect. The existence of the veins of heaven not only allowed a province to have good weather, but also had a direct relationship with the density of the spiritual chi in the province. At the same time, the veins of heaven were also related to an extremely mysterious fate. Fate was difficult to explain because it couldn't be seen or touched. However, it was undeniable that any person or sect had an inseparable relationship with fate. The stronger a person's fate was, the smoother their path of martial arts would be. The stronger a sect's fate was, the smoother its development would be. The veins of heaven were very important. According to the investigation of the sacredine sect, the source of the veins of heaven in an ancient sacred province was in the Jade Lake Mansion. Therefore, the higher-ups of the sacredine sect had sent them to infiltrate the Jade Lake Mansion in order to destroy the source of the veins of heaven in the ancient sacred province. Destroying the source of the veins of heaven in the ancient sacred province. After hearing Wu Dai's words, Xiao Qian's face turned solemn. Beside him, Senior He and Elder Master Bai couldn't help but gasp. There was no doubt that if the sacredine sect had really succeeded in destroying the source of the veins of heaven, it would have been a disaster for the ancient sacred sect. Just thinking about it scared them. Fortunately, Xiao Chun had caught Wu Dai in time and found out everything from her. Now that he knew all this, he had to stop the sacredine sect's actions. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chun looked at Wu Dai and said, "You haven't destroyed the veins of heaven yet, have you? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 763. The situation was much more serious than he had imagined. It was hard to imagine that the sacredine sect had such a big goal. What Xiao Chan was most worried about now was whether the vein of heaven had been destroyed by the sacredine sect. Wu Dai had already given up after hearing Xiao Chen's question. Since she had already said what she needed to say, there was no point in saying more or less. Therefore, without much hesitation, Wu Dai shook her head and said, "Not yet. The vein of heaven has a self-protection mechanism. Those below the saint realm can't even get close to it, let alone enter it. Therefore, the saintess-to-be has been using the talisman given by the sacred master to wear down the self-protection mechanism of the vein of heaven. Calculating the time, it will take at least half a month to break through the self-protection mechanism of the vein of heaven." The vein of heaven didn't have any consciousness or intelligence. However, as a unique existence between heaven and earth, its power couldn't be ignored. There was a self-protection mechanism around the vein of heaven. Even a saint realm expert would find it difficult to break through the self-protection mechanism. Therefore, the disciples of the sacredine sect hadn't destroyed the vein of heaven during the time they were in the Azure Lake Mansion. They could only use the talisman refined by the saints of the sacredine sect before they left to slowly wear down the self-protection mechanism of the vein of heaven before they could enter. Hearing Wu Dai's words, Xiao Chun let out a sigh of relief. As long as it hadn't been destroyed, there would be a chance to salvage the situation. But soon, Xiao Chun thought of a problem. Since the sacredine sect's goal was to destroy the heavenly veins of the ancient saint state, why didn't they just send a saint? Even if it wasn't a saint, wouldn't it be better to send a true saint? Wouldn't the success rate be much higher? Xiao Chun asked the question in his mind. Hearing his question, Wu Dai gave him an answer. It wasn't that the sacredine sect didn't want to send a saint or a saint, but that they had no other choice. The reason was simple. The saints, and saintesses of the four sacred sects were all under the surveillance of the other sacred sects. Once there was any movement, the other sacred sects would be the first to receive the news. Therefore, the sacredine sect had no way of sending the saints and saintesses. After all, if the saints and saintesses of the sacredine sect suddenly disappeared, the ancient sacred sect would definitely receive the news immediately. In that case, let alone destroying the veins of heaven, they might not even be able to successfully infiltrate the Azure Lake Manor. The stronger one was, the more attention they would attract. Under the eyes of so many people, many things would be difficult to do. Therefore, instead of letting the saints and saintesses do it, it would be better to let the saintesses do it. This way, the success rate will be higher. After all, the ancient saint sect would not be prepared. After hearing Wu Dai's explanation, Xiao Chen nodded in agreement. Xiao Chen had asked all the questions he needed to ask. The severity of the matter was beyond his imagination. He decided to tell the truth to the saints. After all, it was related to the veins of the heavens. It was best to let the saints decide for themselves. Xiao Chen looked at Senior He and said, "Senior He, go and report this matter to the holy venerates. Let them make a decision personally." After receiving Xiao Chen's order, Senior He knew that this matter was not a joke. He immediately nodded in agreement and went to see the Azure Lake Saint. After reporting the matter of the Sacred Yin sect to the saints, Xiao Chen asked about Guling Yao. Sensing Xiao Chen's gaze on her, Wu Dai said unhappily, "I've already told you everything I know. What else do you want?" Wu Dai naturally did not have a good impression of Xiao Chen. In her opinion, this man had no manners at all. Faced with Wu Dai's cold rebuke, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "I know, but I'm not going to ask you about this matter. I'm going to ask you about something else." "Something else? What else do you want to ask?" Wu Dai asked in confusion. "You're a disciple of the Sacred Yin sect. Do you know that there's a girl called Gu Lingyao in the Sacred Yin sect?" Xiao Chen asked. Wu Dai was a core disciple of the Sacred Yin sect. When Xiao Chen asked her about Gu Lingyao, he originally thought that he would be able to find out about Gu Lingyao's recent situation from her. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen was disappointed. After hearing Xiao Chen's question, Wu Dai pondered for a moment, then shook her head blankly. "Gu Lingyao? I've never heard of this name. Are you sure she's a disciple of the Sacred Yin sect?" Wu Dai had no impression of Gu Lingyao at all. Looking at Wu Dai's expression, she did not seem to be lying. Furthermore, since she had even told him about the vein of heaven, there was no reason for her to hide anything about Gu Lingyao. Wu Dai truly did not know about Gu Lingyao. She did not even know that there was such a person in the Sacred Yin sect. Xiao Chen was a little disappointed that he did not get any information about Gu Lingyao from Wu Dai. Thinking about it carefully, since Gu Lingyao was related to the moon goddess physique, it was naturally a secret to the Sacred Yin sect. Wu Dai was only a core disciple. It was reasonable that she did not know about Gu Lingyao. After all, core disciples had a hard time coming into contact with the true upper echelons. It seemed that if he wanted to know about Gu Lingyao, he would have to ask the direct disciples or the prospective holy maiden. After asking all the questions, Wu Dai no longer had any value to Xiao Chen. Neither of them spoke anymore. Xiao Chen and Wu Dai each had their own thoughts. For a moment, the room was silent. Not long after, Senior He returned. From the looks of it, he should have already met with the Jade Lake Saint. Seeing this, Xiao Chen asked, "How was it?" "Young Master, I have already informed the Jade Lake Saint." The Jade Lake Saint asked Young Master to send Wu Dai over. She wants to personally ask about it. Senior He replied when he heard Xiao Chen's words. The Jade Lake Saint wanted to personally ask Wu Dai. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not say anything. He had already asked what he wanted to ask. Furthermore, Wu Dai did not know about Gu Lingyao. Since that was the case, there was no harm in handing her over to the Jade Lake Saint. Immediately, Xiao Chen asked Senior He to send Wu Dai to the Guardian Saint. Wu Dai was taken away. As for how the ancient sacred sect would deal with her, Xiao Chen did not care. Now, Xiao Chen was only worried about two things. The first was how the ancient sacred sect would deal with the Sacred Yin sect's actions this time. The second was how Gu Lingyao was doing in the Sacred Yin sect. Slowly walking to the window, Xiao Chen looked at the crescent moon in the sky and softly muttered with a face full of disappointment. "Lingyao, are you doing well in the Sacred Yin sect?" He was very worried about Gu Lingyao. He could not imagine how he would deal with it if something happened to Gu Lingyao. Following Xiao Chen's melancholy, Xiao Sheng's voice rang out in his mind. "Kid, there's no point in thinking about it. Quickly raise your strength. When you become a holy son one day, you can head to the Sacred Yin sect, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." In a chapter. Chapter 764. The disappointment and worry in Xiao Chen's heart was naturally felt by Xiao Sheng. If he wanted to rescue Gu Lingyao, the first step was to become a holy son. Only by becoming a holy son would Xiao Chun have the confidence to personally head to the sacred Yin sect. Right now, Xiao Chen's identity was the holy son of the ancient sacred sect. However, he still couldn't head to the sacred Yin sect because once Xiao Chun went, it was very likely that he would stay in the sacred Yin sect forever. However, once Xiao Chun became a holy son, the sacred Yin sect definitely wouldn't dare to do anything to Xiao Chun. Holy son and holy son seemed to only differ by one word, but the difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. The sacred Yin sect might dare to kill the holy son of the ancient sacred sect, but they definitely wouldn't dare to kill the holy son of the ancient sacred sect. Killing a holy son would at most lead to some small-scale conflicts, and some compensation would be paid in the end. However, if a holy son was killed, it would definitely be a matter of life and death. Therefore, Xiao Sheng had always said that if he didn't become a holy son, Xiao Qin definitely couldn't head to the sacred Yin sect. The identity of a holy son was Xiao Qin's protective amulet, and this was indeed the consensus of the four sacred sects. A holy son couldn't be killed unless you wanted to start an all-out war, but that was a different matter. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Xiao Qin nodded slightly and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, forcibly suppressing the worry in his heart. After a night of silence, he had already reported the matter of the heavenly veins to the various saints. As for how they would decide, it would be up to the various saints. Therefore, Xiao Qin had nothing to do. He cultivated in the Jade Lake sacred sect every day and chatted with Feng Lingye, Su Jin, and other acquaintances from the heavenly Qin continent. His days were rather comfortable. It had been 5 days since Wu Dai was sent to Jade Lake Saint, but Jade Lake Saint had not come to find Xiao Chun. As for Jiyu, Jade Lake sacred sect naturally had its own way of dealing with it. It had nothing to do with Xiao Chun. It had been 5 days, and no one had come to look for him. In Xiao Qin's opinion, the saints must have chosen someone else to accept this mission. After all, the sacred Yin sect was led by a prospective holy maiden. Although Xiao Chun was a prospective holy maiden, there was still a gap between his cultivation and a real prospective holy maiden. The saints must have felt that Xiao Chun was not qualified for this mission. That was Xiao Qin's guess. However, that wasn't the case. At this moment, Jade Lake Saint and the other 4 saints were gathered in the sacred palace of the ancient saint sect. The 5 saints were discussing the vein of the sky. It was related to the veins of the sky, but not all the saints of the ancient holy clan were there. Only 5 of them were there. The 5 saints were sitting cross-legged in the holy palace. One of them looked at Saint Bihu. Veins of the sky again? This sacred Yin sect really doesn't give up. It's not the first time they've thought of seizing the veins of the sky. There wasn't much seriousness in the words of this saint, and he even seemed very relaxed. However, this wasn't strange. After all, this wasn't the first time the sacred Yin sect had thought of seizing the veins of the sky. Moreover, it wasn't just the sacred Yin sect. Wasn't the ancient holy clan the same? On the surface, the 4 sacred sects of the heavenly river continent seemed to be peaceful, but in fact, there were undercurrents surging. There were all kinds of open and covert struggles, and all kinds of methods were emerging one after another. Therefore, the saints of the ancient holy clan were already used to such actions by the sacred Yin sect. Moreover, they weren't too worried. What a joke! Since the veins of the sky were related to the foundation of the ancient holy clan, how could the saints of the ancient holy clan not have any precautions? In fact, even if Xiao Chun hadn't caught Wu Dai this time, the sacred Yin sect wouldn't have succeeded. The source of the veins of the sky was such an important place. So how could the ancient holy clan not have any precautions? Of course, on the other hand, the saints of the sacred Yin sect were also aware of this. Therefore, their actions were mostly just a test. Even if they failed, it wouldn't be a big deal. As for the disciples who were caught by the ancient holy clan, the 2 sacred sects would naturally discuss and resolve the matter. Under normal circumstances, the sacred Yin sect would be the one to compensate, and the ancient holy clan would choose the prisoners. Open and covert struggles but at the same time, they restrained each other. Things would always be controlled within a controllable range. This was the relationship between the four sacred sects. Xiaochen obviously didn't expect that the saints of the ancient Holy Clan would be so relaxed about this matter. They weren't worried at all. Following this saint's words, another saint said, "The Sacredine sect is probably taking revenge. After all, we only sent people to the Sacredine province last time. It hasn't been that long, and they're already sending people to target our veins of the sky. What a bunch of narrow-minded women." There was a faint smile in the saint's words. Hearing that, the saint who spoke before also smiled. "Forget it. Let's talk about how to deal with this. Jade Lake, I think you should make the decision. But still, soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. Don't let others see you as a joke." He directly handed the decision to the Jade Lake Saint. Hearing that, the Jade Lake Saint maintained a gentle smile as he spoke in an elegant tone. "Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. Since it's like this, we can only let the fifth candidate take action. Since they've sent a candidate, we can't let a saint take action. Let Xiao Chun take action." Hearing that, the other four saints were slightly taken aback, but they all smiled and said, "But Xiao Chun has just become a candidate, and we do need to give him some training. But how about this? Let Hu Fei secretly go to the Jade Lake Manor. After all, Xiao Chen's cultivation is still too low. Hu Fei can protect him in the dark if there's any danger." As this matter concerned the veins of the sky, the saints simply threw the matter to Xiao Chun. The mission didn't change, and Xiao Chun would still be in charge of it. He would lead people to stop and capture the disciples of the Sacredine sect. After the decision was made, the influence of the five saints slowly disappeared. For a moment, the sacred palace fell silent again. At the same time, within the Jade Lake Sacred Sect, the Jade Lake Saint had a smile on his face as he called Guo Taifeng over and asked him to bring Xiao Chen over. Xiao Chun didn't know why the Jade Lake Saint had summoned him, but he still followed Guo Taifeng to the Jade Lake Saint's cave residence. He met the Jade Lake Saint in the same garden as before. The Jade Lake Saint's face was elegant, and he didn't seem nervous at all. Seeing that Xiao Chun had arrived, the Jade Lake Saint gestured for Xiao Chun to take a seat. After taking a seat opposite the Jade Lake Saint, Xiao Chun took the initiative to ask, "Saint, why have you called me here?" The saints have already made a decision regarding the veins of the sky. The mission remains the same, and you will still be in charge of it. Stop and capture the disciples of the Sacredine sect. He knew that the Sacredine sect's goal was related to the veins of the sky, but the saints still wanted him to stop it. After all, the Sacredine sect had a candidate leading the team this time. Xiao Chen clearly didn't expect the saints to make such a decision. Seeing that Xiao Chun was a little stunned, the Jade Lake Saint smiled and said, "Why? Don't you have confidence in facing the candidate of the Sacredine sect? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 765. The Jade Lake Saint teased. Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled helplessly and said, "That's not it, but it's about the vein of the heavens. But why do I feel that you're not nervous at all?" The Jade Lake Saint, or rather, the saints of the ancient sacred sect, gave Xiao Chun the feeling that they were not nervous at all. After all, it was about the vein of the heavens, the foundation of the ancient sacred sect. Seeing Xiao Chen's doubts, the Jade Lake Saint smiled slightly and then explained the relationship between the four sacred sects to Xiao Chun. However, Xiao Chun had just joined the ancient sacred sect, so he naturally knew very little about the relationship between the four sacred sects of the Tiana continent. After hearing the Jade Lake Saint's words, Xiao Chun finally understood. It turned out that such things happen from time to time. Moreover, even if he did not catch Woody, the vein of the heavens would not have any accidents. That was why the saints were so relaxed and did not take this matter to heart at all. The four sacred sects competed with each other, but they also restrained each other. They used all kinds of means within a controllable range. In this regard, Xiao Chun could only smile helplessly. It seemed that he was the one who was not anxious. From the beginning to the end, This was simply an ordinary contest between the ancient sacred sect and the Sacredine sect. He finally understood. Seeing this, the Jade Lake Saint also smiled and said, "What? Do you think that the secret contest between the four sacred sects is like children playing house?" In fact, the contest between the four sacred sects was insignificant. In the eyes of outsiders, it was indeed like a joke. However, if you really thought so, then you were very wrong. Before Xiao Chun could reply, the Jade Lake Saint continued, "It seems to be insignificant, but in fact, there is an undercurrent surging. The four sacred sects have been restraining each other because they have no other choice. After all, the strength of the four sacred sects is almost the same. Once a full-scale war breaks out, the final result will only be a lose-lose situation. And these seemingly joking contests and senseless probings are often the most threatening. Under such probing, once a flaw is revealed, what follows will be a fatal strike. In other words, the Sacredine sect's operation this time may seem like they don't have any hope at all. It's just a very ordinary test. However, if they really succeed by a fluke and the ancient sacred sect's vein of the heavens is destroyed, do you know what the ancient sacred sect will have to face next? It's the crazy attacks of the other three sacred sects," Xiao Chun replied after hearing Bihu Saint's question. Nodding slightly, the Jade Lake Saint smiled and said, "That's right. In a seemingly ordinary probing, the moment you reveal a flaw and allow the other party to grasp it, what awaits you is a frenzied attack. It's like the wild beasts in the forest. Usually, it seems peaceful, but as long as you suffer the slightest injury or reveal the slightest sign of defeat, the other wild beasts will go crazy at the sight of blood. In the end, you can only end up being torn apart." The Jade Lake Saint told Xiao Chun to never underestimate the probing between the four sacred sects. This was because whether it was the ancient sacred sect, the Sacredine sect, or the other two sacred sects, everyone was waiting for an opportunity to strike. Once the opportunity came, it would be the time to bare their fangs. Xiao Chun naturally knew about this. Now that he was about to face the saintest-to-be of the Sacredine sect, would Xiao Chun be afraid? The answer was no. Although Xiao Chun's current cultivation was still on the lower side compared to the other saintest-to-be and saintest-to-be, Xiao Chun had Xiao Sheng. If he really wanted to compete with the saintest-to-be of the Sacredine sect, Xiao Chun wasn't afraid. Moreover, Xiao Chun was looking forward to being able to ask about Gu Lingyao from the saintest-to-be. After chatting with the Jade Lake Saint for a while, the Jade Lake Saint smiled and said, "All right, prepare to go. As for the specifics, I'll leave it to you to arrange. It's also up to you to decide how many disciples you want to bring." Everything would be decided by Xiao Chun, and the other saints wouldn't interfere. Hearing this, Xiao Chun stood up and bowed, but before he left, he suddenly turned his head and smiled at the Jade Lake Saint. "Lord Saint, since I'm already the saintest-to-be of the ancient sacred sect, why would I be afraid of the saintest-to-be of the Sacredine sect? It's not that I don't have confidence." With that, Xiao Chun walked away. Looking at Xiao Chun's departing figure, the Jade Lake Saint smiled and said, "This little guy is quite interesting. No wonder Tian Feng, Kuang Li, and Qing Ju thinks so highly of him. In time, the ancient sacred sect might really have a fifth saintest-to-be." After bidding farewell to the Jade Lake Saint, Xiao Chun returned to the first sacred palace of the ancient sacred sect. To deal with the people of the Sacredine sect, Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't go alone. He would definitely bring his own people. However, there weren't many disciples that Xiao Chun could trust. There were only a few dozen disciples in the punishment hall, and Xiao Chun did indeed intend to choose some of them to carry out this mission with him. In total, he chose 20 of the 80 disciples in the punishment hall. These 20 were all core disciples and weren't weak. In addition to these 20 core disciples, Xiao Chun also looked for Chun Yu to borrow Yi Su. Although Yi Su was Chun Yu's sacred servant, she had the strength of a direct disciple. Chun Yu naturally wouldn't refuse Xiao Chun's request. After receiving Yi Su's consent, Chun Yu nodded happily and agreed. On the same day, Xiao Chun brought back Yi Su and the 20 core disciples from the ancient sacred sect. In addition to this group of people, Xiao Chun also planned to bring Zhang Buiyun and the others. After all, the Sacred sect had two direct disciples this time. According to Xiao Chen's plan, Yi Su, Zhang Buyun, and the others would deal with the two direct disciples, while the 20 core disciples of the Punishment Hall would deal with the 5 core disciples of the Sacred sect. Elder He and Elder Master Bai would deal with the half Saintess-to-be beside the Saintess-to-be. As for the final Saintess-to-be, Xiao Chan would naturally deal with her. After everything was ready, Xiao Chan then led the group to the Vein of the Heavens. The source of the Vein of the Heavens in the ancient sacred state was in the Azure Lake Mansion. The people of the Sacred sect should be nearby at this time. As long as they could find and capture them, the mission would be considered complete. They headed toward the mountain range called Heavenly Mountain. The source of the Vein of the Heavens was in Heavenly Mountain. Xiao Chan didn't use a teleportation formation because he didn't want to alert the enemy. Instead, they hurried by flying. It took them 3 days to reach the periphery of Heavenly Mountain. At this time, there were still a few days before the half-month deadline that Wu Dai had mentioned, so there was no need to rush. Xiao Chan said to the group when they reached the periphery of Heavenly Mountain. Heavenly Mountain isn't very big, and the disciples of the Sacred sect must be hiding here. Don't alert the enemy. Secretly search for their whereabouts, find them, and capture them in one fell swoop. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 766. The Heaven Mountain Range wasn't that big. Everyone nodded in agreement when they heard Xiao Chen's words. But in the end, Yi Su calmly asked, "Senior brother Xiao Chen, how are we going to find those people from the Sacred sect?" It's simple. Since they're already trying to break through the self-protection of the heavenly veins, their hiding place must be near the source of the heavenly veins. We'll secretly head to the source of the heavenly veins, and we'll naturally find them there. Xiao Chen smiled in response to Yi Su's question. The heavenly veins were invisible. The only way to find and approach them was through the source of the heavenly veins. To put it bluntly, the source of the heavenly veins was a node between the heavenly veins and the real world. It was also the only place that could be considered to be destroyed. Once the source of the heavenly veins was destroyed, the entire heavenly veins would wither in a very short period of time. They were certain that the people from a Sacred sect were hiding near the source of the heavenly veins. After all, they had to constantly pay attention to the source of the heavenly veins to ensure that they could destroy the heavenly veins of the ancient Saint Province in the shortest time possible. Under Xiao Chen's lead, the group immediately entered the Heaven Mountain Range. Old He and Elder Master Bai walked to the front of the group. The two of them were half-step saints, and their perception was the strongest. With them at the front, they could quickly sense every movement in front of them. They secretly entered the Heaven Mountain Range. At the same time that Xiao Chen's group entered the Heaven Mountain Range, there was a small lake in the depths of the Heaven Mountain Range. Although it was called a lake, it was completely different from an ordinary lake. This was because there wasn't any water in this lake. Instead, there were strands of spiritual energy that could be seen flowing in the lake. The lake was formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This was the source of the heavenly veins. On a small hill not far from the spiritual energy lake, several young girls in black clothes and 2 old men were hiding in the forest. The few of them sat in a circle, trying their best to conceal their auras. Needless to say, these girls were obviously disciples of the Sacred sect. The girl in the lead had a delicate appearance. She gave off an extremely cold feeling between her brows. Her face was pale and stern, and her pair of beautiful eyes would occasionally look at the spiritual energy lake below. This young girl was none other than the Sacred sect's prospective holy maiden, Mu Yao. She was ranked 4th among the Sacred sect's prospective holy maidens. Senior Sister Mu Yao, there's no need to be so nervous. The heavenly vein source will be opened in a few days. At that time, we'll be able to complete our mission. Seeing that Mu Yao was still looking at the source of the heavenly vein, one of the Sacred sect's disciples stepped forward and said with a smile. However, Mu Yao's expression didn't change in the slightest upon hearing this. and she replied in a cold voice, "Wu Dai, have you still not heard from him?" These 2 days, Mu Yao had a bad feeling in her heart. She hadn't heard from Wu Dai for many days. Moreover, the ancient sacred sect still hadn't responded. This was too strange. From the very beginning, Mu Yao was very clear that this was merely a test by the Sacredine sect. Thus, Mu Yao didn't have much hope from the very beginning. If the heaven veins of the ancient saint state were so easily destroyed, then the ancient saint sect would have been destroyed long ago. Originally, she thought that the ancient saint sect would have taken action long ago. However, until now, not a single disciple of the ancient saint sect had appeared. This made Mu Yao suspicious. Hearing Mu Yao's words, the female disciple shook her head and said, "There's still no news." However, senior sister doesn't need to worry. Perhaps it's inconvenient for Wu Dai. She comforted Mu Yao not to be too nervous. Mu Yao didn't say anything in response and sank into deep thought. Just as Xiao Chun had guessed, the Sacredine sect disciples were indeed hiding near the source of the heavenly vein source. They had been hiding here all this time, secretly observing the changes in the source of the heavenly vein source. Time passed slowly, and soon night fell. Under the cover of the night, the heavenly mountain range gradually quieted down. Perhaps it was because of the source of the heavenly vein source, but there weren't even any wild beasts in the heavenly mountain range, let alone demonic beasts. Thus, whenever night fell, the heavenly mountain range would be terrifyingly quiet. The sky was filled with stars, and Mu Yao and the others closed their eyes and sat down cross-legged to rest. Being in the heavenly mountain range, Mu Yao and the others naturally didn't dare to cultivate. They had to be vigilant at all times, especially the 2 old women by Mu Yao's side. Just like Senior He and Elder Master Bai, they were also half-saints. The 2 old women had always been on guard against every movement in their surroundings, and it was only in this quiet night that they maintained their vigilance. Not far away, Xiao Qin's group was getting closer and closer. It was also at this moment that Senior He and Elder Master Bai, who were leading the group, suddenly stopped. Elder Master Bai turned to look at Xiao Chun. "Young Master, I've found them. They're just ahead. I can sense the aura of a half-saint expert. However, they've been secretly on guard. If we continue forward, we'll definitely be discovered by them." They'd found the location of Mu Yao and the others, but it was impossible to approach them stealthily. After all, there were 2 half-saints by Mu Yao's side. Even the slightest movement could be detected by them. Xiao Chun smiled faintly when he heard Elder Master Bai's words. "Then let's surround them. Don't give them a chance to escape. Then we'll take them down in one fell swoop." Since they couldn't hide their tracks, they'd make their move directly. Moreover, once they secretly formed an encirclement, Mu Yao and the others wouldn't be able to escape even if they discovered them. When they heard Xiao Qin's words, everyone consciously spread out, and Mu Yao and the others quickly formed an encirclement. In order to be absolutely safe, Xiao Qin had brought more people than Mu Yao and the others. After the encirclement was formed, Xiao Qin looked at Senior He and Elder Master Bai with a smile. Then, he led the 2 old men and swaggered toward Mu Yao and the others. There was no longer any way to hide their tracks. At the same time, the 2 old women who were originally sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed suddenly opened their eyes. "Are the people from the ancient sacred sect here?" Mu Yao slowly opened her eyes when she sensed the strange movements of the 2 old women. She asked calmly before they could say anything. Mu Yao's expression didn't change much, as if she had already expected this. As soon as Mu Yao's voice fell, it wasn't the 2 old women who responded to her. Instead, it was a voice with a faint smile that sounded from the darkness. "Senior and junior sisters of the Sacredine sect, it's been hard on all of you. You must have waited in this deep forest for more than half a month. Since you've come to the ancient sacred province, how could you not visit the ancient sacred sect? Today, I'm here to welcome all of you to the ancient sacred sect for a short stay." As soon as the voice sounded, Xiao Chun, Senior He, and Elder Master Bai slowly walked out of the darkness and appeared in front of Mu Yao and the others, begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. In a chapter. Chapter 767. Mu Yao's expression didn't change when she saw Xiao Chun and the other two walking out of the darkness. At the same time, the other Sacredine sect disciples beside Mu Yao also looked at Xiao Chun as though they were facing a great enemy. Their eyes met and Mu Yao said calmly, "You're the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect? Oh, right. A few days ago, the ancient sacred sect had a new quasi-holy son. I think it should be you." Xiao Chun was wearing an ancient robe, which proved that he was the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect. However, Mu Yao had never seen Xiao Chun before, but she quickly guessed Xiao Chun's identity based on the information she received a few days ago. A few days ago, the ancient sacred sect had a new quasi-holy son named Xiao Chun. This fact naturally couldn't be hidden from the other three major sections. Therefore, it wasn't strange that Mu Yao could guess Xiao Chun's identity. Upon hearing Mu Yao's words, Xiao Chun didn't deny it. He smiled and said, "Senior sister is smart, but I'm new here and don't know senior sister." Compared to Mu Yao, Xiao Chun didn't know much about the quasi-holy sons of the other three major sections. Therefore, he naturally couldn't guess Mu Yao's identity. Mu Yao replied calmly, "Mu Yao of the Sacredine sect." Since things had come to this, there was no need to hide her identity anymore. After knowing Mu Yao's identity, Xiao Chun said with a smile, "Senior sister Mu Yao, the game is over. Come back to the ancient sacred sect with me." Now that Xiao Chun had successfully found Mu Yao and the others, he had surrounded them. According to the usual arrangement of the four major sects, Mu Yao and the others would naturally stay in the ancient sacred sect for a period of time. Then, the Sacredine sect would come and pick them up. Of course, the Sacredine sect would have to pay a price. Otherwise, Mu Yao and the others would have to stay in the ancient sacred sect forever. Mu Yao was naturally aware of this. However, it was obviously impossible for her to leave with Xiao Chun just like that. As soon as Xiao Chun said that, Mu Yao smiled coldly. "Junior brother Xiao Chun, you must be joking. With just a few words, you wanted to go back to the ancient sacred sect with you? Don't you think it's child's play?" Obviously, a battle couldn't be avoided if they wanted to return to the ancient sacred sect. Xiao Chun shook his head helplessly. "It seems like a battle is unavoidable. Since that's the case, let's do it." The Sacredine sect's disciples naturally didn't want to surrender. The disciples of the Sacredine sect's disciples naturally. The Sacredine sect didn't disciples' and the two sides' fight began. Sacredine sects of the Sacredine sect. In terms of numbers, the ancient sacred sect clearly had an absolute advantage. However, the key to this battle was still Xiao Chun and Mu Yao. They were both prospective saints, and their battle would determine the direction of the entire battle. Sacredine Yao, S Sacredine sect, sacred sect. S Yao. While they were fighting, Senior He and Elder Master Ba were fighting with the two old women behind Mu Yao. The shockwaves from the battle between four half-saint experts were naturally terrifying. Therefore, the four of them consciously chose to fight in the sky, so as not to affect the disciples below. While everyone was fighting, Xiao Chun and Mu Yao stood opposite each other. A gust of wind blew past. Without any warning, Mu Yao made the first move. She took a step forward and appeared before Xiao Chun like a ghost. She slapped out her palm casually. Xiao Chun didn't dare to be careless when facing Mu Yao's palm. He punched out with all his strength. The fist and palm collided. In the end, Xiao Chun was forced back 7 or 8 steps, while Mu Yao didn't move at all. Xiao Chun was at a disadvantage in the first exchange of blows. Mu Yao said softly, "How did you become the candidate when you're only at the initial level of the Taoist plane?" Xiao Chun's cultivation was too low, and it wasn't just a little bit inferior to Mu Yao. After all, including the ancient sacred sect, almost all the prospective saints were at the Tao transformation realm. Only Xiao Chun was an exception, and he'd become a prospective saint with a cultivation at the Tao gate realm. However, it was precisely because of such a huge gap in their cultivation that Xiao Chun felt somewhat powerless when facing the other prospective saints at the moment. After all, no one who could become a prospective saint was simple. He wouldn't dare say that he could win against someone at the same cultivation level, let alone with such a huge difference in cultivation level. She was a little surprised that Xiao Qin's cultivation level was so low. In Mu Yao's impression, anyone who could become a prospective saint had to be at least at the Dao transformation realm. It was because of this fact that Mu Yao didn't deliberately sense Xiao Qin's cultivation level. She'd taken Xiao Qin to be a Dao transformation realm cultivator from the beginning. However, Xiao Qin's level of cultivation was exposed in that head-on clash just now. He was at the lower level of Taoism, which surprised Mu Yao a little. It was indeed unheard of for someone who had achieved a minor accomplishment in the Taoist gate realm to become a candidate for the position of chosen saint. However, despite her surprise, Mu Yao saw hope in Xiao Qin's cultivation. It was the hope of escaping. Even if she was captured by Xiao Qin and brought back to the ancient sacred sect, there wouldn't be any danger to her life, because the Sacredine sect would definitely contact the upper echelons of the ancient sacred sect. At that time, Mu Yao would also be able to safely return to the Sacredine province. However, if she could defeat Xiao Qin and escape, it would definitely be a good thing for the Sacredine sect. But for the ancient sacred sect, it would definitely be humiliating. Defeat Xiao Qin and escape, Mu Yao thought. At the same time, after being forced back by Mu Yao's palm, Xiao Qin shook his slightly numb arm and smiled bitterly inside. Looks like I've overestimated myself. Compared to the other prospective saints, I'm indeed far inferior. The reason why Xiao Qin didn't directly let Xiao Shang take action was because he wanted to personally experience just how big the gap was between him and the other prospective saints and saintesses. Reality had proven that the gap between the current Xiao Qin and the other prospective saints and saintesses wasn't small at all. It was just an ordinary exchange, but Mu Yao had completely suppressed him. As such, if they really fought, Xiao Qin didn't doubt that Mu Yao would definitely be able to defeat him within 100 moves. He still wasn't a match for the other prospective saints and saintesses. He didn't even have the strength to put up a fight. Facing Xiao Qin's bitter smile, Xiao Shang said unhappily, "Kid, do you really think that the prospective saints and saintesses are rotten cabbages? You're a genius, but they're not idiots. They're both prospective saints and saintesses. If you can really surpass an entire realm and defeat them, then you've really seen a ghost. All right, enough nonsense, let me do it." It was absolutely impossible to surpass an entire realm and defeat a prospective saint or saintess. Hearing Xiao Shang's words, Xiao Qin didn't refute and nodded slightly. Then, he relaxed his mind and handed over control of his body to Xiao Shang, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 768. Mu Yao's eyes flashed with confidence when she saw that Xiao Qin wasn't taking the initiative to attack. She said, "It seems like the rumors are true. You're just a prospective saint with a mental state, but you don't have the combat strength of a prospective saint or saintess. Do you really think you can catch me?" Mu Yao's confidence was boosted after the short exchange. Xiao Qin was only at the initial Daogate realm. His cultivation was too low, so it was impossible for him to catch her. However, what Mu Yao didn't expect was that Xiao Qin, who had been standing there silently, would suddenly release a terrifying aura. This aura had clearly surpassed the initial Taoist realm, and in the blink of an eye, it had already reached the Taoist realm. She was still laughing at Xiao Qin for being only at the initial Daogate realm. However, Xiao Qin had reached the Dao transformation realm in just a few breaths of time. Mu Yao's expression changed abruptly. She looked at Xiao Qin in disbelief and exclaimed, "Impossible! You use a secret technique?" Mu Yao naturally thought of secret technique when Xiao Qin's cultivation suddenly increased by an entire realm. However, Xiao Shang, who had already taken control of Xiao Qin's body, used Xiao Qin's identity and laughed when he heard her words. "Are you stupid? What kind of secret technique in this world can help a Daogate realm cultivator advance by an entire realm?" Mu Yao thought it was a secret technique, but it was obviously impossible. The higher one's cultivation was the weaker the secret technique's power would be, and the less it could increase one's cultivation. For example, Xiao Chun rarely used the Azure Dragon transformation after breaking through to the Dao Gate realm. This was because the Azure Dragon transformation couldn't increase one's cultivation by much after reaching the Dao Gate realm. Moreover, it had side effects, so it was very useless. It was impossible for a secret technique to increase one's cultivation by an entire realm in the Dao Gate realm. Mu Yao was stunned when she heard Xiao Sheng's words. She naturally knew this. However, Xiao Chun was clearly in the Dao Gate realm just now, but now he had become a Dao transformation realm cultivator. What other explanation could there be for such a huge difference other than a secret technique? Hiding his strength? Impossible. Mu Yao's mind was in chaos. In contrast to Mu Yao's shock, Xiao Sheng stepped forward unhurriedly and walked towards Mu Yao. As he walked, he said indifferently, "Do you really think that the ancient sacred sect would let me become the quasi-sacred son if I didn't have some ability? Also, if I wasn't confident, why would I appear here? Would I be courting death for nothing?" After he finished speaking, Xiao Chen's figure directly disappeared without any warning. When he reappeared, he was already to Mu Yao's left. When she saw Xiao Chun suddenly appear, the corners of Mu Yao's eyes narrowed. She thought to herself, so fast. It was on a completely different level from before. Just now, Mu Yao hadn't been able to clearly see Xiao Chen's movements. It was as if he had teleported close to Mu Yao. Xiao Chun wielded the ink dragon sword and directly slashed out. This attack wasn't Xiao Chen's martial skill. Instead, it was Xiao Sheng's martial skill. There was a flash of golden light, and the ground was torn apart like paper. The tip of the sword swept past. Mu Yao didn't dare hesitate in the slightest. She immediately dodged to the side, narrowly dodging Xiao Chen's attack. However, at the same time, Xiao Chen also took a step forward and directly closed in on Mu Yao, beginning a battle with her. The two of them fought fiercely. When she faced Xiao Chun again, Mu Yao instantly fell into a disadvantageous position. It was hard to imagine how Xiao Chun, who couldn't even take a single attack from her earlier, had become so powerful now. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged several hundred blows. At this moment, the others nearby all paid attention to the battle between Xiao Chun and Mu Yao. The level of danger of the battle between the two candidates was far from what they could imagine. When they saw that Xiao Chun had actually suppressed Mu Yao, the ancient sacred sect's morale increased greatly. However, there was also someone who was rather puzzled. That person was Yisu. Yisu couldn't say that she was familiar with Xiao Chun, but she was definitely not unfamiliar with him. At this moment, when she saw that Xiao Chen's strength had actually suppressed Mu Yao's, Yisu was extremely puzzled. She secretly wondered how Xiao Chun could be so strong. One had to know that she and Chun Yu had specially calculated Xiao Chen's strength in the past. Compared to the other candidates, Xiao Chun was indeed a little weaker. However, now it seemed that wasn't the case. Although he was puzzled, Xiao Chun didn't care about these things. Or perhaps it should be said that he was Xiao Sheng. At this moment, he was having a great time fighting Mu Yao. To be honest, Xiao Sheng was actually very envious of Xiao Chen's physical body. Under the transformation of the tempered battle body, Xiao Chen's physical body could be said to be flawless. At the very least, Xiao Sheng had never encountered anyone with a body more perfect than Xiao Chen's at the same level of cultivation. Whether it was strength, speed, or explosive power, Xiao Chen's physical body could be said to be the strongest among those of the same level of cultivation. Rays of golden sword light constantly revolved around Xiao Sheng. With every slash of his sword, the golden sword light pounced towards Mu Yao like a pack of wolves. Mu Yao was exhausted from running for her life. It was difficult for her to deal with them. The battle didn't last very long. After just a little over 100 breaths, Mu Yao showed signs of defeat. Her eyes were filled with shock. She didn't dare to believe that Xiao Chen's battle prowess was actually so strong. He was no longer a candidate or holy maiden. His battle prowess could be said to be on par with the holy princes. It should be known that even the other candidates of the holy insect couldn't defeat her in a short 100 breaths. However, Xiao Chen had done it. Although she hadn't been defeated yet, Mu Yao knew very well that she wouldn't be able to last much longer. As expected, after 3 moves, Xiao Chen sent Mu Yao flying with a single slash. She fell heavily to the ground. This time, before Mu Yao could get up, Xiao Chen's ink dragon sword was already pressed against her throat. She didn't dare to move at all. If Xiao Chen's ink dragon sword moved even the slightest bit forward, Mu Yao would die. She gritted her teeth and looked at Xiao Chen with a complicated expression. Mu Yao didn't expect that she would be defeated so easily by Xiao Chen. Facing Mu Yao's gaze, Xiao Chen only smiled faintly. "You're still too inexperienced." Hearing this, Mu Yao bit her lips even harder. Her face was filled with unwillingness. Of course, she did not know that the one who had defeated her was not Xiao Chen, but Xiao Sheng, who had once been the first saint of the Tiana continent. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Sheng returned control of Xiao Chen's body. After all, Xiao Chen couldn't rely on her strength for too long. Otherwise, it would be a huge burden for both Xiao Chen and Xiao Sheng. Mu Yao's aura quickly withered. However, Xiao Chen still hesitated and directly sealed Mu Yao's cultivation, making it impossible for her to fight back. Seeing Xiao Chen's aura return to the initial Daogate realm, a strange light flashed through Mu Yao's eyes. She asked unwillingly, "Xiao Chen, you said you didn't use any secret techniques. Your true cultivation is only at the initial Daogate realm. So what if I did, and so what if I didn't? You've lost, so follow me back to the ancient sacred sect," Xiao Chen replied nonchalantly. "Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." Chapter 769. After successfully defeating Mu Yao and sealing her cultivation, Mu Yao clenched her teeth when she heard Xiao Chen's words. She snorted coldly and unwillingly. She had never imagined that she would one day be defeated by someone at the initial Daogate realm. She was extremely unwilling, but at the same time, she was very curious about Xiao Chen. She wanted to know what method Xiao Chen had used to raise her cultivation from the initial Daogate realm to the Daogate realm. She was curious and unwilling, but there was one thing that couldn't be changed. She had lost, and her fate was clear. She would return to the ancient sacred sect with Xiao Chen. As for the final result, it would depend on how the two sects communicated or whether the Sacredine sect could give a satisfactory price to the ancient sacred sect. Of course, Mu Yao wasn't too worried about her own life. If it were an ordinary disciple, the Sacredine sect might have given up directly, but she was a quasi-saint. The Sacredine sect wouldn't let her die in the ancient sacred sect, and the ancient sacred sect clearly didn't care too much about her life. After all, in the eyes of the ancient sacred sect's saints, the life of a quasi-saintess couldn't be compared to the compensation of the Sacredine sect. She snorted coldly and didn't reply. At the same time, after Xiao Chen captured Mu Yao, the other disciples of the Sacredine sect lost a lot of momentum. They were quickly captured by Isu and the others and had their cultivation sealed. After all the disciples were captured, the 2 old women who had followed Mu Yao were tactful enough to give up on resisting. After all, even Mu Yao had been defeated, so they naturally had no reason to continue fighting. Along with Elder Master Bai, the 4 half-step saints landed in front of Xiao Chen. Glancing at the 2 old women, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "I'm sorry, seniors." As Xiao Chen spoke, Elder He and Elder Master Bai immediately acted and sealed the 2 old women's cultivations. The 2 didn't resist. After all, the loser naturally had to be aware of the loser situation. After everyone's cultivations were successfully sealed, Xiao Chen brought Mu Yao to a place nearby. The 2 of them stood opposite each other. Looking at Xiao Chen, Mu Yao said indifferently, "Why? Do you have any questions?" Xiao Chen had brought her here alone. How could Mu Yao not guess that Xiao Chen wanted to talk to her alone? Xiao Chen didn't hide anything and asked calmly, "I want to ask you about someone. Do you know Guling Yao?" Mu Yao was a candidate for Holy Maiden, so her position in the Sacredine sect wasn't low. Therefore, Xiao Chen felt that she should know about Guling Yao. As expected, Mu Yao's expression changed when she heard the name Guling Yao. Although she quickly covered it up, it still didn't escape Xiao Chen's eyes. As expected, this last knew about Gu Lingyao. In that moment, Xiao Chen's heart also became a little nervous. He didn't know if Ling Yao was doing well in the Sacredine sect. Xiao Chun stared at Mu Yao. To be honest, compared to the mission itself, Xiao Chun was more concerned about Gu Lingyao. Otherwise, he wouldn't have accepted the mission so easily. Mu Yao waited for Mu Yao's reply. From Xiao Chen's eyes, Mu Yao could see that if she didn't say anything, Xiao Chen definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. In that moment, Mu Yao also thought of some rumors about Gu Lingyao, and a smile appeared on her face. I know, you're Xiao Chun from Tianfeng Xingzong, right? The person who was almost killed by Holy Maiden Yunwan. Mu Yao revealed Xiao Chen's identity with a single sentence. In response, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change as he said, I don't want to listen to nonsense. Tell me about Ling Yao, or you know the consequences. Xiao Chen wasn't a gentleman. If Mu Yao didn't say anything, Xiao Chen didn't suggest using some methods. It wasn't even impossible to kill her. At most, he would just be punished by the ancient saint sect. A trace of undisguised killing intent flashed in his eyes. Sensing this trace of killing intent, Mu Yao naturally knew what choice she should make. Mu Yao took a deep breath and straightforwardly told Xiao Chun about Gu Lingyao. According to Mu Yao, Gu Lingyao had been under house arrest ever since she came to the Sacredine sect. Outsiders couldn't come in contact with her at all. However, as the Holy Maiden candidate, Mu Yao still knew some things, such as the moon goddess physique. She knew why the saints of the Sacredine sect had forcefully brought Gu Lingyao back. However, according to Mu Yao's information, Gu Lingyao shouldn't be in any danger for the time being. It was said that the saints and the Holy Maiden were still making preparations. These preparations were very complicated and troublesome and required a lot of time. Therefore, Xiao Chan didn't have to worry about Gu Lingyao for the next few years. What Mu Yao said wasn't much different from what Xiao Sheng had told him. Hearing this, Xiao Chan was slightly relieved. As long as there weren't any problems in the short term, Xiao Chen would have time. And right now, what Xiao Chen lacked the most was time. If Gu Lingyao was in danger now, then Xiao Chen really didn't have any good ideas. Letting out a breath, Xiao Chen's expression improved a little. However, at this moment, the smile on Mu Yao's face became a little strange. However, what I've said is only for the short term. The final result won't change. It's almost impossible for you to save Gu Lingyao unless you have the ability to fight against the entire Sacredine sect. However, is that possible? Not to mention that you're just a candidate holy son. Even if you can become the holy son of the ancient Sacredine sect, the ancient Sacredine sect won't fight to the death with the Sacredine sect for you. Therefore, I advise you to give up. It was impossible to save Gu Lingyao. Hearing Mu Yao's words, Xiao Chan said indifferently, nothing is absolute in this world. Perhaps the Sacredine sect will be the ones to feel despair and regret in the end? Give up if he couldn't save Gu Lingyao? Xiao Chun had never thought of that. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chun brought Mu Yao back to the others. He nodded at Lao He and Lao Bai, and then the group left the mountain range. However, not long after Xiao Chun and the group left, a young man in a loose white robe appeared in the sky. This young man was none other than one of the 4 holy sons of the ancient Sacredine sect, Hu Fei. In fact, Hu Fei had been hiding in the dark all this time. His purpose was to protect Xiao Chun. This was also the Jade Lake Saint's intention. After all, Xiao Chen's cultivation was too low. However, Hu Fei didn't expect that Xiao Chun would actually defeat Mu Yao. This made him a little surprised. A hint of curiosity flashed in Hu Fei's eyes as he said indifferently, "This kid's methods are really strange. He can forcefully raise his cultivation by an entire realm in the Dao Gate realm. Moreover, it doesn't seem like a secret technique. It seems like we've underestimated him." Interesting. Seeing everything, Hu Fei was also very interested in Xiao Chen's methods. It didn't seem like a secret technique, but it could raise one's cultivation. It was a very strange method. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 770. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know of Hu Fei's existence. As a holy son, Hu Fei naturally had his own means. Not to mention Xiao Chen, even a half-step saint like Elder Master Bai and Elder He would find it difficult to detect him. It wasn't just Hu Fei, the other holy sons and holy daughters also had such means. It was still the same saying, never underestimate a holy son. Moreover, when facing a holy son or holy daughter, you couldn't treat them as the younger generation because their means were feared by many experts of the older generation. Otherwise, how could they become a holy son or holy daughter? After returning to the Jade Lake sacred sect safely, Xiao Chen successfully captured Mu Yao and the other disciples of the Sacredine sect. Even the Jade Lake saint was a little surprised by this news. After all, Xiao Chen's cultivation was an entire realm lower than Mu Yao's. After successfully completing the mission, Xiao Chen took Mu Yao and the others back to the ancient sacred sect after bidding farewell to Feng Lingye, Zhang Buyun, and the others. In the ancient sacred sect, there were special half-step saint deacons in charge of taking care of Mu Yao and the others. Xiao Chen didn't need to worry about this. Of course, the reward for this mission also entered Xiao Chen's pocket. Moreover, to Xiao Chen's pleasant surprise, the reward was much more generous. He didn't know if it was because the mission's difficulty had increased, but the reward was much more generous. In addition to the elemental wind pill, there was an additional marrow-cleansing saint pill, as well as some other medicinal pills for cultivation. The reward was indeed generous. Of course, it also complemented each other. After all, at the beginning, the invitation only stated that there were direct disciples of the Sacredine sect, but the fact was that even the prospective holy daughter had infiltrated the ancient sacred sect. Therefore, the mission's difficulty increased, so naturally the reward also increased. Satisfied with the reward, Xiao Chen looked at Mu Yao and smiled faintly. Senior sister Mu Yao, rest well in the ancient sacred sect for a while. Junior brother will take his leave. With that, Xiao Chen, Yisu, and the other disciples of the First Sacred Palace's disciplinary hall strode away, leaving Mu Yao and the others gnashing their teeth. Xiao Chen didn't care about what happened to Mu Yao after that. After returning to the First Sacred Palace, before Xiao Chen could return to his cave abode, Yisu received a message from Xiao Chen asking her to make a trip there. Xiao Chen did not refuse Chen Yu's summons and followed Xiao Chen to his abode. As soon as he entered, he saw Chen Yu lying on a bamboo chair in the courtyard. Seeing Xiao Chen come, Chen Yu laughed loudly. Haha, congratulations to junior brother Xiao Chen for returning victorious. Furthermore, you've even captured the prospective holy maiden of the Sacredine sect. Right now, junior brother Xiao Chen's name has already spread throughout the entire Sacredine sect. I believe that in the future, no one will be so blind as to doubt junior brother Zhao's strength. Chen Yu smiled enthusiastically. In response, Xiao Chen unceremoniously sat down opposite Chen Yu and said in annoyance, "That's not important. However, I do remember that I was tricked by senior brother Chen Yu again. This was originally your mission." When they finally returned, the Jade Lake Saint had already told Xiao Chen that the mission was originally Chen Yu's, but Chen Yu had given it to Xiao Chen and used him again. How could Xiao Chen feel good? Chen Yu smiled awkwardly when he heard Xiao Chen's question. He didn't dwell on the topic and immediately changed the topic. Haha, let's not talk about this. I hurriedly called junior brother here because I have something important to discuss with junior brother. Something important? Xiao Chen immediately frowned when he heard Chen Yu's words. Chen Yu was definitely a ruthless person. In Xiao Chen's opinion, the important thing he was talking about was that he was going to be used again. Therefore, before Chen Yu could finish speaking, Xiao Chen directly interrupted him. Senior brother, let's stop talking. Let's make things clear first. Ever since I entered the First Sacred Palace, I haven't had a moment of leisure. For at least a year, I won't go out to carry out any missions. Senior brother, don't ask me to deal with Do E anymore. I want to rest. Other than that, everything else is fine. It had been almost 2 months since he entered the ancient sacred sect. Xiao Chen didn't even have time to cultivate. He could only cultivate quietly every night. Therefore, when Chen Yu spoke, Xiao Chen shut him up. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chen Yu said with a smile, "Junior brother, you think too much. Senior brother knows this, so I have a heaven-defying opportunity for junior brother." A heaven-defying opportunity? Forget it, senior brother. I'm afraid I don't have the fortune to enjoy your opportunity. Xiao Chen rejected decisively without hesitation. Xiao Chen didn't believe that Chun Yu would give him a heaven-defying opportunity. Perhaps there was some troublesome matter and this lazy guy was throwing it to him because he didn't want trouble. However, Xiao Chen was wrong this time. This time, Chun Yu did have a heaven-defying opportunity for Xiao Chen. Besides, this opportunity was something that Chen Yu fought for Xiao Chen. If not, perhaps Xiao Chen wouldn't have gotten it. However, this opportunity obviously wasn't given to Xiao Chen for free. Chen Yu's thoughts were actually very simple. Xiao Chen was still too weak and wasn't a match for Du Yi yet. If he wanted to overpower Du Yi, there would definitely be a battle between Xiao Chen and Du Yi. Therefore, Chen Yu wanted to help Xiao Chen improve his strength as soon as possible. Of course, this was also somewhat troublesome, because such an opportunity had to be fought for by oneself. Chen Yu didn't want to do it, so, "Junior brother, don't be hasty. Listen to me first. It won't be too late for you to make a decision later." Chen Yu said with a smile after Xiao Chen rejected him decisively. Without waiting for Xiao Chen's consent, Chen Yu continued to speak. In fact, this opportunity wasn't a secret. There was a small world in the ancient sacred sect called the 100 Spirit World. The reason why it was called the 100 Spirit World was because there were 100 spirit pools coexisting in this small world. There were strong and weak spirit pools. Of course, even the weakest spirit pool was much better than the outside world. It could be said that the 100 Spirit World was one of the top cultivation secret realms in the ancient sacred sect. Now that the 100 Spirit World was about to open for 2 years, Chen Yu hoped that Xiao Chen could enter the 100 Spirit World to cultivate. It was that simple. Upon hearing Chen Yu's words, Xiao Chen was immediately suspicious. After all, this matter sounded like there were only benefits and no disadvantages. Xiao Chen looked at Chen Yu and asked with a doubtful expression, "Senior brother Chen Yu, is what you said true? Don't you have any other motives?" Xiao Chen could be said to be afraid of ropes for the rest of his life. Therefore, when facing Chen Yu, Xiao Chen naturally did not dare to be careless. Seeing this, Chen Yu said with a smile, "Junior brother, don't worry. I won't harm you. It's really that simple this time. The 100 Spirit World is a famous cultivation secret realm in the ancient sacred sect. There are only 100 spots each time it opens. Junior brother, why are you hesitating?" Chen Yu said with a strong sense of righteousness. From his tone, the 100 Spirit World was indeed a treasured place for cultivation. If he could cultivate in it, it would definitely be greatly beneficial to him. For a moment, Xiao Chen was a little hesitant. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 771. Xiao Chen hesitated. On the one hand, the 100 Spirit Realm was indeed beneficial to him. But on the other hand, he was afraid that Chen Yu would cheat him. Seeing that Xiao Chen was hesitating, Chen Yu added, "Junior brother, this is a great opportunity. Think about it. If you can monopolize a spiritual pool to cultivate for 2 years, it will not be impossible for you to break through to the Tao transformation realm." A spiritual pool was not a rare thing for Xiao Chen. After all, there were spiritual pools in the Tianqian continent. Moreover, Xiao Chen had seen the legendary heavenly spiritual pool. However, Chen Yu's promise was that he could monopolize a spirit pool to cultivate for 2 years. This was very terrifying. Whether it was in the Tianqian continent or in the sage sects like Tianfeng Xingzong, even if there were spiritual pools, they could not be counted in years. Think about it. A sect had at least tens of thousands of disciples. How many spiritual pools could there be? If a disciple monopolized a spiritual pool for 2 years, what about the other disciples? Therefore, although spiritual pools were not rare, they were absolutely rare. Therefore, even though Xiao Chen was now a prospective saint, he could not possibly monopolize a spiritual pool for 2 years. On the other hand, if Xiao Chun could monopolize a spiritual pool to cultivate for 2 years, it would be like a pie falling from the sky for Xiao Chun. With such pure spiritual qi in the spiritual pool, coupled with Xiao Chen's talent, it would be like sitting on a rocket. Even if it was not a rocket, it would be like sitting on a plane. This was definitely a good opportunity to shorten the gap between his cultivation and that of the other prospective saints and saintesses. Therefore, under such a great temptation, Xiao Chun was finally moved. He looked at Chunyu and said with some hesitation, "Senior brother, are you really not lying to me?" Seeing that Xiao Chun was already tempted, Chunyu struck while the iron was hot and said, "Why would senior brother lie to you? Junior brother, don't worry. If senior brother lied to you, junior brother can punish me however you want." Since Chunyu had already put it this way, Xiao Chun pondered for a moment, then gritted his teeth and nodded. "All right, then I'll have to thank you, senior brother." In the end, he agreed to Xiao Chen's request. There was nothing he could do about it. 2 years of cultivation in the spiritual pond was too tempting for him. Back in Nine Firmament's palace, Xiao Chun had only been able to cultivate in the spiritual pond for a few days. From this, it could be seen that regardless of which sect it was, the spiritual pond was the most sought-after place. Every disciple would want to cultivate in the spiritual pond. After agreeing with Chunyu told Xiao Chun that they would head to the Myriad World Palace in 3 days. At that time, a saint would lead Xiao Chun into the 100 Spirit World. After agreeing with Chunyu, Xiao Chun stood up and bid farewell. After Xiao Chun left, Isu, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. "Saint, if you do this, senior brother Xiao Chun will hate you." "How can that be? I didn't lie to him. After this matter is over, I will really give him 2 years of cultivation time in the spiritual pond." "The sacred master has already agreed," Chunyu said. "But aren't you worried that senior brother Xiao Chun won't be able to protect even one spiritual pond?" Isu asked. "Haha, then you can rest assured. Junior brother isn't so easy to deal with. Wasn't Saintess Mu Yao of the Sacred Yin sect captured by junior brother? So, don't worry, it won't be a problem," Chunyu said with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, Chunyu stood up and stretched. Then, he sighed helplessly and said, "Sigh, I have no choice. It's our first sacred palace's turn this year." With that, Chunyu turned around and left lazily. If Xiao Chun heard their conversation, his first reaction would definitely be, "F***, I've been tricked again." Of course, Xiao Chun didn't know about this. After Xiao Chun returned to his cave residence, Saint Qingju was also in the cave residence of Saint Huiyin. The two saints sat opposite each other and looked at Saint Huiyin. Saint Qingju said with a smile, "Huiyin, you're in charge of the 100 Spirit World this time, right? And it seems that it's the first sacred palace's turn to send someone. How is it?" Saint Qingju said with a gloating expression. Saint Huiyin took a big gulp of wine and said angrily, "What are you talking about? You're still talking about it? Just thinking about it makes me angry. That brat Chun you actually sent Xiao Chun out to fight and even talked about conditions with me." "Oh, what conditions did Chun Yu raise?" Hearing this, Saint Qingju took a sip of wine and asked curiously. When it was the first sacred palace's turn to fight, Saint Qingju had long expected that Chun Yu would definitely send someone else. However, he didn't expect Chun Yu to actually talk about conditions. "What conditions can there be?" This brat said that if Xiao Chun meets the requirements and protects the spiritual pool of the ancient sacred sect, I'll give Xiao Chun 2 years of cultivation time in the spiritual pool, Saint Huiyin said angrily. "Interesting. And then you agreed?" Saint Qingju said. "What else can I do? Also, I don't know what method this brat used. Other than Xiao Chun, he even asked Emperor Qing to help him in the same battle." Emperor Qing actually agreed, Saint Huiyin said. The two saints chatted as they drank. They were talking about the competition in the 100 Spirits realm. Xiao Chun naturally had no idea about the 100 Spirit world's struggle for supremacy, and Chunyu had indeed lied to him. This was because the 100 Spirit world did not belong to the ancient sacred sects alone, but to all 4 sacred sections. Speaking of the struggle for hegemony in the 100 Spirit world, It had to be traced back to 300 years ago. At that time, the people of the four sacred sects jointly discovered a new small world. After some exploration, this new small world was determined to be created by a quasi-sage. The value of a small world created by a quasi-saint naturally couldn't be underestimated. After investigating, the four sacred sects discovered a total of 100 spiritual pawns in this small world, and these spiritual pawns were slightly different from ordinary spiritual pawns. Compared to ordinary spiritual pools, the spiritual energy in the spiritual pools in the 100 spirit world was purer. It seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. It was more convenient and effective for cultivators to absorb it. After continuous exploration and experimentation, they found that the spiritual pools in the 100 spirit world were twice as effective as ordinary spiritual pools. This discovery caused the value of the 100 spirit world to soar again. However, since the 100 spirit world was discovered by the four sacred sects at the same time, it was obviously impossible for any of them to monopolize it. Therefore, the four sacred sects had no choice but to discuss and come up with the 100 spirit world battle. The purpose was to divide the spiritual pools in the 100 spirit world through battles. Of course, this division wasn't permanent. It would be done once every 10 years. The final result would determine the specific division of the spiritual pools in the 100 spirit world for the next 10 years. This is the 4th chapter. There's another chapter at 9 o'clock. Today I'll update 5 chapters. Brothers, please support me. Monthly votes and recommendation votes. Thank you. Chapter 772. The division of the spirit pool in the 100 spirit realm was determined by the outcome of the battle, and the battles were also divided into several levels. Every time the battle of the 100 spirit realm began, the four sacred sects would each send an ordinary disciple, a core disciple, a personal disciple, a prospective holy son, and a holy son. There would be a total of 5 battles, and the number of spirit pools each sect would have for the next 10 years would be determined based on the outcome of the 5 battles. In the battle of the 100 spirit realm 10 years ago, the ancient sacred sect had obtained a total of 20 spirit pools. It was not the most, but it was not the least either. Therefore, strictly speaking, the 100 spirit realm did not belong to any of the sacred sects. It was shared by the 4 sacred sects. Of course, each sacred sect also had an entrance to the 100 spirit realm, which was built by the 4 sacred sects themselves. It was connected to the 100 spirit realm so that their disciples could enter and cultivate. As for the ancient sacred sect, since the battle of the 100 spirit realm began, the 4 sacred palaces had been in charge of it in turn. Last time, the 4th sacred palace was in charge, and this time, it was the 1st sacred palace's turn. However, Chunyu did not participate in the battle of the 100 spirit realm. Instead, he used some unknown method to get the 2nd holy son, Emperor Qing, to agree to participate in the battle of the 100 spirit realm for him. As for Xiao Chun, he naturally represented the prospective holy son of the 1st sacred palace. As for the other personal disciples, core disciples, and ordinary disciples, Chunyu had already made arrangements. Hearing that Chunyu had made a condition with him, Saint Qingjue smiled faintly and said jokingly, "Chunyu is really smart. However, Xiao Chun is only in the Dao Gate realm. Isn't it a little too early for him to participate in the battle of the 100 spirit realm?" Xiao Chen's cultivation was too low. Logically speaking, he should not be the one to go. Instead, you should be the one to go. However, after hearing Saint Qingjue's words, Saint Huiyun's expression turned serious, and he deliberately lowered his voice. "That's what I thought too." However, Master agreed. He said that if Xiao Chun could really fulfill his request, he would be given 2 years to cultivate in the spirit pool of the 100 spirits realm. I don't know what Master is thinking. There was only one person in the entire Tiana continent who could be called Master by Saint Huiyun, and that was the ancestor of the ancient sacred sect, Randang Kozii. Not only was Randang Kozii the master of Saint Huiyun, but he was also the master of Saint Qingju. Saint Qingju withdrew the smile on his face when he heard that his master was paying attention to a prospective holy son. However, Saint Qing Ju quickly smiled again. Since Master has done this, he must have his reasons. Moreover, I can't see through Xiao Chun. He's only at the initial Dao Gate stage, but he's able to defeat the saintess of the Sacredine sect. It's really surprising. That's right. Saint Firecloud agreed. It seems that the battle of the 100 Spirit Realm this time will be very interesting. It's a pity that I have something to do and can't go with you. Saint Qing Ju said helplessly. Unaware of the battle of the 100 Spirit Realm, Xiao Chun cultivated peacefully in the cave mansion for 3 days. During these 3 days, Xiao Chun also used the marrow cleansing Saint Elixir to cleanse his marrow once again. At the same time, he also refined all the 100 elemental wind pills. After another round of marrow cleansing, Xiao Chun's physique was purified again. At the same time, his spiritual energy became purer, and his cultivation also improved, reaching the limit of the initial Dao Gate stage. As for the temper battle body, it also improved greatly because of the 100 elemental wind pills. However, he still needed more elemental wind pills to break through to the second stage of the Jade Organs realm. During these 3 days, Xiao Chun almost didn't care about the matters of the punishment hall. For some reason, he was very quiet during this period, which saved Xiao Chun a lot of trouble. It was rare to be able to cultivate peacefully, although the time was very short. With the help of the marrow cleansing Saint Elixir and the elemental wind pills, Xiao Chun's strength still improved a lot. On the morning of the 4th day, Xiao Chun came outside the Myriad World Palace. However, Xiao Chun didn't see Chenyu here. Instead, he saw 3 disciples of the first sacred palace. One of them was a pro-disciple, one was a core disciple, and the other was an ordinary disciple. In addition to the 3 of them, there was also a young man standing with his hands behind his back. The young man was wearing the immemorial robe of the ancient sacred sect's holy son. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was resolute and expressionless. However, the faint majestic aura emitted from his body did indeed make people unconsciously feel pressured. Although it was the first time they met, Xiao Chun's first impression of this young man was that he was a very domineering person, as if he was an emperor who ruled the world. A young man who possessed a domineering aura that wasn't inferior to any emperor in the world. Moreover, this domineering aura seemed to be innate. It was indeed very eye-catching. Xiao Chun sized up the young man in front of him. At the same time, the young man slowly opened his eyes and tilted his head to look at Xiao Chun. However, it was only a glance before the young man withdrew his gaze and said indifferently, "Did Chun Yu really send you here to be cannon fodder?" The young man's words were very unpleasant, but there wasn't the slightest disdain in them. It was as if he was stating the truth. Hearing this, Xiao Chun's gaze shifted. He suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. It felt as if he had been tricked by Chun Yu again. Just as Xiao Chun was secretly feeling uneasy, the core disciple of the first sacred palace took the initiative to come up to Xiao Chun and respectfully said to Xiao Chun in his heart, "Senior brother prospective holy son." Who is he?" Xiao Chun nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the holy son and asked, "Who is he?" Among the 4 holy sons of the ancient sacred sect, Xiao Chun had only seen Chun Yu and Hu Fei. As for the other 2 holy sons, he had never seen them before. He guessed that this young man must be one of the other 2 holy sons. In response to Xiao Chun's question, the disciple looked at the holy son in front of him with a longing expression. There was also a hint of admiration in his tone. "He is the 2nd holy son of the ancient sacred sect, Senior Brother Emperor Qing. He is in charge of the 2nd sacred palace. The 2nd holy son of the ancient sacred sect, Emperor Qing." Hearing this, Xiao Chun looked at Emperor Qing again. Just like his name, he was indeed a natural emperor. It was as if he didn't care about anyone. Xiao Chun didn't know why Emperor Qing would appear here. Then, he asked the disciple about the 100 Spirit World. Seeing that Xiao Chun knew nothing about the 100 Spirit World, the disciple was puzzled at first. How could Xiao Chun know nothing about the 100 Spirit World since he had already participated in the 100 Spirit World battle? Although it was a little strange, he still told Xiao Chun the truth about the 100-spirit world. After hearing the disciples' explanation, Xiao Chen's face turned darker and darker. In the end, Xiao Chun stood there with an ashen face. He didn't know how to describe his current feelings. He only wanted to say, "Damn it, I've been tricked by Chunyu again. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 773. After listening to the disciples' explanation, Xiao Chen finally understood the meaning of the 100 Spirits realm. Damn it, I've been tricked. I've definitely been tricked. Who would have thought that I was still one step behind in the end? Chunyu was definitely someone who could lie without blushing. What bullsh asterisk T about belonging to the ancient sacred sect? The 100 Spirit realm was shared by the 4 sacred sects. This time, he had entered the 100 Spirit realm to participate in the 100 Spirit realm contest. Xiao Chun was once again used as a tool by Chun Yu due to a moment of carelessness. Xiao Chen's expression was ugly, and he felt extremely helpless. At this moment, Xiao Chun only wanted to look up to the sky and howl, "Chunyu, you bastard." He cursed Chunyu in his heart. At the same time, in the first sacred palace, Chunyu was lying on a bamboo chair. Achoo, who is scolding me? He had been tricked. He had been tricked by Chunyu again. Now, Xiao Chun was only thinking about Chunyu's promise of 2 years of cultivation in the spiritual pool. He did not know if Chunyu had lied to him. If Chunyu had lied to him, then Xiao Chun had really been tricked. Not only had he not benefited from it, but he had also been used by Chunyu again. Xiao Chen's face was extremely ugly. Just as he was feeling extremely depressed, Huiyun Saint appeared in front of everyone. Seeing the ugly expression on Xiao Chen's face, Huiyun Saint was secretly amused. He did not need to think to know that Xiao Chen had been tricked by Chunyu again. At this moment, Xiao Chen's face was as ugly as a virgin who had been cheated of her virginity. Holding back his laughter, Huiyun Saint's gaze fell on Emperor Qing. He coughed lightly and said, "Emperor Qing, you are the chosen this time. We have to rely on you." Emperor Qing was the chosen, so Xiao Chun and the others naturally had to follow his lead. However, Emperor Qing said without hesitation, "I'm only responsible for blocking the other chosen. As for the rest, I don't care. Anyway, I'm only here to return the favor. So, Lord Sacred Master, you should let Xiao Chun lead the team." He found it troublesome and did not care. He was only responsible for blocking the other chosen and returning the favor. Upon hearing Emperor Qing's words, Huiyun Saint smiled and looked at Xiao Chun. "Xiao Chun, you will lead the team then." Lead the team? Upon hearing Huiyun Saint's words, Xiao Chun wanted to refuse, but Huiyun Saint did not give him a chance. And follow. Do you even need to ask? Since Huiyun Saint said that Xiao Chun would lead the team, the 3 of them naturally followed Xiao Chen's lead. But Xiao Chun said angrily, "Lead the team? Let your ass." He followed Huiyun Saint into the Myriad World Palace with a look of displeasure. They followed the passage to the 100 Spirit realm to the end. There was also a white stone pillar. As Huiyun Saint formed a seal, a door of light appeared. This was the entrance to the 100 Spirit realm. The entrance opened, but just as everyone was about to enter, Xiao Chun finally couldn't help but ask, "Lord Sacred Master, I have something to ask. I wonder if Lord Sacred Master knows about Senior Brother Chinyu's promise to me?" Since he had been tricked, Xiao Chun could only maximize the benefits. If Chinyu lied to him about his promise, then Xiao Chun might as well consider not doing anything. After all, there was no benefit to it. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Huiyun Saint smiled and said, "Of course I know, but if you want to get it, you have to meet the requirements. In the last 100 Spirit Realm battle, my ancient sacred sect obtained 20 spirit pools. This time, you are the leader. So, this 100 Spirit Realm battle can't be less than 20 spirit pools. As long as you meet the requirements, there will naturally be no problem with the promise." 20 spirit pools was the minimum requirement. As long as they met the requirements, Chinyu's promise would be effective. Of course, if they didn't meet the requirements, then they couldn't blame anyone. After all, 2 years of cultivation time in spirit pools was enough for many disciples to cultivate. Hearing Huiyun's saint's words, Shaochen forcibly resisted the urge to curse. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything else. Kid, it's useless to think about other things now. Work hard, even if it's just for 2 days of cultivation time in spirit pools. Knowing Xiao Chen's feelings, Xiao Sheng deliberately teased him. Hearing this, Xiao Chen directly chose to ignore it. Xiao Sheng was definitely gloating, but there was no other way. He could only bite the bullet and do it. 20 spirit pools, 2 years of cultivation time in spirit pools. Sighing helplessly, everyone entered the 100 spirit realm under Huiyun's saint's lead. As soon as Xiao Chun entered the 100 spirit realm, he was completely attracted by the spiritual energy here. It was so rich in spiritual energy. Moreover, white spiritual energy pillars could be seen everywhere in the 100 spirit realm. After counting carefully, there were exactly 100 spiritual energy pillars. He guessed that each pillar represented a spirit pool. Compared to the outside world, the spiritual energy in the 100 spirit realm was at least 10 times richer. And this was only the spiritual energy floating in the 100 spirit realm. It was hard to imagine how rich the spiritual energy in the spirit pools would be. Shaochen wasn't the only one. The other 3 people from the first sacred palace were the same. Only Qing, he was as calm as ever. He stood with his hands behind his back as if he was an outsider, unmoved by everything around him. After all, he was a holy son. He didn't care too much about the 100 spirit realm, because every holy son would be given a spirit pool of their own after the 100 spirit realm battle. They could cultivate at any time. With such treatment, they naturally wouldn't be surprised by the rich spiritual energy in the 100 spirit realm. No matter what, the holy son would be given a spirit pool of his own. Looking around, the people from the other 3 sacred sects hadn't arrived yet. Huiyun Saint asked them to rest on the spot and wait for the other 3 sacred sects to arrive. They didn't have to wait for long. Soon, a space passage opened and a beautiful woman walked out. Following her were 5 disciples, all of whom were beautiful young girls. This group of people was the disciples and saints of the Sacredine sect. However, when Xiao Chun looked at the Sacredine sect team, his face suddenly darkened and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. Xiao Chun saw a familiar person beside the saint of the Sacredine sect, a familiar person that made Xiao Chun's killing intent explode. She was wearing the robe of the holy daughter of the Sacredine sect. This person was none other than the holy daughter of the Sacredine sect, Yun Wan, who had personally taken Gu Lingyao away, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 774. The moment he saw Yun Wan, Xiao Chun could not help but burst out with a strong murderous intent. This was because it was this woman who had taken Gu Lingyao away with her own hands. It was also her who had almost taken his life. Xiao Chun did not hide his killing intent, so it was naturally felt by everyone. For a moment, whether it was the Sacredine sect or the ancient sacred sect, everyone's gaze landed on Xiao Chun. The beautiful woman from the Sacredine sect took the lead and said with a smile, "Haha, Huiyun, it seems that this disciple of yours has a strong killing intent towards the saintess of our Sacredine sect." The beautiful woman was a saint from the Sacredine sect. Hearing this, Yin Luan said indifferently, "He's just an ant. Back then, we didn't kill him, and he became the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect. But that's all there is to it." Yin Luan said indifferently in the face of Xiao Chen's killing intent. There was no hostility, only contempt and indifference. It was as if she was not worried that Xiao Chen would be a threat to her one day. Hearing Yin Luan's words, Xiao Chen's killing intent grew even stronger. Even Saint Huiyun's eyes flashed with a cold light. However, what was most unexpected was that just as Yin Luan finished speaking, a green light flashed past without any warning and went straight for Yin Luan. Yin Luan's face darkened in the face of this green light. She immediately struck out with her palm and blocked the green light. Then, Her cold gaze locked onto Emperor Qing. The green light just now had come from Emperor Qing. No one had thought that Emperor Qing would attack without saying anything. Although it was just a casual attack, it had indeed caused the atmosphere of the two sacred sects to become tense. With a gloomy face, Yun Luan shouted coldly, "Emperor Qing, what is the meaning of this?" "Nothing. I just don't like you," Emperor Qing said indifferently in the face of Yun Luan's cold shout. It was as if he was giving her a taste of her own medicine. Just now, Yun Luan had shown contempt for Xiao Chun. Now, Emperor Qing also showed contempt for Yun Luan. Feeling the Cyan Emperor's contempt, as if even looking at her was superfluous, Yun Luan became even angrier. Waves of spiritual energy gradually spread out from her body, and her voice became even more gloomy as she said, "Cyan Emperor, you want to fight with me?" Yun Luan clearly had the urge to attack. However, Emperor Qing remained indifferent. His expression did not change, and the contempt in his tone did not diminish at all. "Do you dare?" These three simple words vividly displayed the Qing Emperor's dominance. They were both saints and saintesses, but the Qing Emperor gave off the feeling that he could easily crush Yun Luan to death. Of course, this was indeed a little exaggerated. As they were both saints and saintesses, Emperor Qing naturally could not casually crush Yun Luan to death. However, in terms of strength, Yun Luan was indeed slightly inferior to Emperor Qing. After all, Emperor Qing was ranked second among the four saints of the ancient sacred sect, while Yun Luan was ranked fourth among the four saintesses of the sacred sect. There was indeed a slight difference between the two, but it was definitely not big. At least, Emperor Qing could not easily defeat Yun Luan. Completely angered by Emperor Qing's words, Yun Luan immediately prepared to attack. However, a saint of the sacred sect stopped her first. "Yun Luan, the battle for the hegemony of the 100-spirit world is important." The battle for the hegemony of the 100-spirit world was about to begin. It was obviously unwise to fight Emperor Qing at this time. Hearing this, Yun Luan was unwilling, but she still forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart. She glared fiercely at Emperor Qing, but Emperor Qing chose to ignore her. He did not expect Emperor Qing to be so straightforward and merciless to Yun Luan. Although he did not know what Emperor Qing meant, and whether it was because Yun Luan had insulted him, Xiao Chun still had a better impression of Emperor Qing. At least when he saw Yun Luan looking down on him, Emperor Qing chose to stand up for her and directly suppressed Yun Luan to the point where she could not raise her head. Just as the atmosphere between the two sides eased slightly, another space passage appeared. This was the space passage from the Sacred Sun sect. The four sacred sects of the Tiana continent, the Ancient Sacred Clan, the Sacred Clan, the Sacred Sun Clan, and the Sacred Heavenly Clan, accompanied the people of the Sacred Sun Clan. The leader was a young-looking saint, and beside him was a burly, rough-looking young man wearing the uniform of the Sacred Sun Clan son. The young man's name was Yin Xiong, and he ranked third among the four Sacred Sun sects, prospective Sacred Sun sects, personal disciples, and core disciples follow behind him. As soon as Yin Xiong appeared, his gaze fell directly on Emperor Qing, and he said loudly, Emperor Qing, it seems that you and I can have a big fight this time." Yin Xiong's character was just like his appearance. He was straightforward and violent, and at the same time, he regarded fighting as his life. However, Emperor Qing said indifferently, "If Hu Fei came, maybe you two could have a big fight, but I'm not interested in you. I'm just here to help," Emperor Qing said indifferently. Emperor Qing said indifferently. He was right. After all, by right, Chenyu should be the one to come this time. However, Emperor Qing wanted to return a favor, and hence, he came on behalf of Chenyu. Initially, he was just going through the motions. But now, Emperor Qing paused and glanced at Yun Luan before continuing. "But now I've changed my mind. I want to teach those cheese a lesson." Cyan Emperor. Cyan Emperor didn't mention a name, but everyone knew who he was referring to. Therefore, Yunlan immediately snarled with an ice-cold expression as though he wanted to tear Cyan Emperor apart. Sensing the strong smell of gunpowder between Emperor Qing and Yunlan, Yin Xiong's interest was immediately piqued. He laughed loudly and said, "Haha, interesting, interesting. Emperor Qing, why are you arguing with this little girl?" "It's nothing. I just don't like her," Emperor Qing said indifferently. While the three holy sons and holy daughters were talking, the Heavenly Saint sect finally arrived. They were also led by a saint, and beside the Heavenly Saint sect stood a young man in the Heavenly Saint sect's holy sun robes. However, when Xiao Chen inadvertently glanced at the people from the Heavenly Saint sect, Xiao Chen's expression changed drastically, and he froze on the spot. Xiao Chen saw a beautiful figure beside the holy son of the Heavenly Saint sect. She was dressed in white and looked like an otherworldly fairy who had fallen into the mortal world. He wasn't shocked by the girl's appearance, but because the girl in white was Qin Shu, the woman Xiao Chen had been searching for. After not seeing him for so many years, Qin Shu gave off a much colder feeling. Perhaps it was because of the ice god's body. It was as though he could freeze people and make people unconsciously stay away from him. However, Xiao Chen didn't care about this at all. After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Chen came back to his senses and clenched his fists unconsciously. He took a deep breath and ignored the holy sons, holy daughters, and the saints present. Xiao Chen shouted loudly, "Qin Shu," begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 775. Xiao Chen's sudden shout instantly attracted the attention of many people, including Qin Shu, who was in the Heavenly Saints sect. Qin Shu, who originally had a cold expression and a chilling aura around him, was also stunned when he saw Xiao Chen. Not only that, his originally expressionless face was now filled with tears of joy. His eyes were slightly red, and his face was filled with disbelief and surprise. After a short moment of being stunned, Qin Shu flashed and threw himself into Xiao Chen's arms. Everyone was already surprised when Xiao Chen called out Qin Shu's name. Now that Qin Shu took the initiative to throw himself into Xiao Chen's arms, everyone was dumbfounded, especially the people of the Heavenly Saints sect. Qin Shu was also a disciple of the Heavenly Saints sect. In just 3 years, Qin Shu could be said to be the dream lover of countless disciples in the Heavenly Saints sect, including the Holy Sons. Seeing Qin Shu and Xiao Chen hugging each other, the Holy Son of the Heavenly Saints sect's face darkened, and he immediately shouted with killing intent, "Boy, you're courting death." This Holy Son of the Heavenly Saints sect was called Han Meng. He ranked third among the 4 Holy Sons of the Heavenly Saints sect, and was also one of Qin Shu's admirers. Although he was a holy son, Han Meng had always been pursuing Qin Shu. Unfortunately, he had not succeeded so far. Not to mention success, Qin Shu had not even exchanged a few words with him. In the Heavenly Saints sect, Qin Shu was known as the Ice Beauty. She treated everyone with a cold and unapproachable attitude. It felt as if her heart was frozen. It could be said that Qin Shu was forbidden. Now that it saw Qin Shu hugging another man, one could imagine how the frost python felt. However, Xiao Chen ignored the frost python's roar. He didn't expect to find Qin Shu here. At this moment, Xiao Chen only had Qin Shu in his eyes. Xiao Chen chose to ignore everything else. Looking at his wife, who was still as beautiful as ever, Xiao Chen called out softly, "Shui Ro." He had a lot to say, but he didn't know where to start. Just as Xiao Chen was looking at Qin Shu affectionately, Han Guangliang couldn't hold back anymore. With a roar, the frost python decided to attack. "You are courting death." He slapped out his palm to face the frost python's attack. Just like before, the Lotus Emperor blocked the attack for Xiao Chen. Han Guangliang glared at the frost python angrily. At the same time, Qin Shu looked at the frost python with a cold expression. "Frost python, what is the meaning of this?" The frost python's attack on Xiao Chen had undoubtedly angered Qin Shu. Facing Qin Shiru's roar, the frost python retracted his murderous aura and revealed an ugly smile. Junior sister, this guy is from the ancient saints sect. He took advantage of you. The frost python could be said to be obedient to Qin Shiru. Therefore, even though he was angry, he still explained with a smile. However, the frost python's explanation was met with a cold reply from Qin Shiru. Qin Shiru said without hiding anything, "He is my husband. Also, frost python, I have nothing to do with you. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs." Qin Shiru knew the frost python's feelings for him, but he didn't care about him at all. In Qin Shiru's heart, only Xiao Chun was his husband. Husband? The famous ice beauty of the ancient saints sect was married, and her husband was a prospective holy son of the ancient saints sect? Everyone was curious. However, the frost python's face darkened when he heard this. He stared at Xiao Chun like a poisonous snake. He didn't want to accept this fact, but Qin Shiru didn't seem to be faking it. This sudden change made the people of the four saint sects unable to accept it. Kid, not bad. You actually hooked up with someone with the ice goddess physique. Hee. Even Xiaoshan couldn't help but tease. Qin Shiru's appearance was obvious. Moreover, he had the ice goddess physique. The ice goddess physique and the moon goddess physique were special physiques of the same level. They were both very strong. Although he didn't say it explicitly, Xiao Sheng was a little envious of Xiao Chun. One had the moon goddess physique, the other had the ice goddess physique. Moreover, they were both peerless beauties. This kid's luck with women was really. He ignored Xiao Sheng's teasing. At this moment, the frost python was completely enraged. He couldn't care less about how Qin Shiru would look at him. The frost python only had one thought, and that was to kill Xiao Chun on the spot. A surge of killing intent spread out from the frost python's body. Sensing this killing intent, Saint Huiyun's face darkened. The frost python wanted to kill Xiao Chun on the spot. Huiyun Saint quietly came to Xiao Chun and protected him behind him. However, the frost python didn't attack in the end. This was because the accompanying saint from the Heaven Saint sect shouted, "Stop!" The frost python had no choice but to obey the saint's order. Moreover, even if he insisted on attacking, he couldn't kill Xiao Chun with Saint Huiyun around. He unwillingly chose to stop. At the same time, the saint from the Heaven Saint sect looked at Xiao Chun calmly. He didn't expect this to happen. He said calmly, "You're Xiao Chun, the new candidate of the saint from the Heaven Saint sect, right?" Xiao Chun didn't feel any hostility from the saint from the Heaven Saint sect. Hearing this, he nodded slightly in response. Seeing this, the saint from the Heaven Saint sect continued to ask, "Are you really married to Qin Shiru?" "That's right. Before I entered the Heaven Saint sect, Xiao Chun and I were already married." This time, Qin Shiru didn't wait for Xiao Chun to reply. He wasn't shy at all. Hearing Qin Shiru's reply, Xiao Chun couldn't help but feel warm. Qin Shiru wanted to tell everyone about their relationship. At the same time, he also hoped that the Heaven Saint sect wouldn't make things difficult for him. Seeing that Qin Shiru took the initiative to reply, the saint from the Heaven Saint sect's expression changed slightly. An inexplicable, complicated look flashed across his eyes. After a moment of silence, the saint from the Heaven Saint sect continued to speak. "Xiao Chun, do you know Qin Shiru's current status in the Heaven Saint sect? Do you know that she has the rare ice god body? I don't care what kind of experience you've had in the past, but whether it's an ordinary person or a martial artist, it's important to be well matched in terms of social status. Do you think you're still worthy of Qin Shiru?" Qin Shiru's status in the Heaven Saint sect wasn't low. Although Qin Shiru wasn't a saint or a candidate of the Heaven Saint sect yet, and was only a personal disciple, Qin Shiru's master was the patriarch of the Heaven Saint sect. Just this identity alone made Qin Shiru not inferior to the four saints. After all, he was the patriarch of the Heaven Saint sect, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 776. The elder of the Heavenly Sage sect had admitted the relationship between Xiao Chun and Qin Shiru. However, according to him, that was in the past. Now, Qin Shiru and Shao Chun had entered the Heavenly Sage sect and the Ancient Sage sect respectively. After not seeing each other for so many years, could the two of them still be the same? Even ordinary couples would have times of separation, let alone warriors. In the world of warriors, the relationship between husband and wife could be said to be firm, but could also be said to be extremely fragile. A change in the status or cultivation of either of the husband and wife could lead to the separation of the two. This was what the elder of the Heavenly Sage sect wanted to express. In layman's terms, Shao Chun was no longer worthy of Qin Shiru. Why was it that Shao Chun was now the prospective holy son of the ancient sage sect? Although his status seemed very high, it was only for ordinary disciples. As for Qin Shiru, as the disciple of the Heavenly Sage sect's old ancestor, it was no exaggeration to say that it wouldn't be long before Qin Shiru became the holy son of the Heavenly Sage sect. This was the difference in status between the two. However, after hearing the words of the Heavenly Sage sect saint, Huayun Saint, who was standing in front of Shao Chun, was secretly amused. The old ancestor of the Heavenly Sage sect? He underestimated Shao Chun too much. Others didn't know, but Huayun Saint knew that his master, the old ancestor of the ancient sage sect, Randang Kozii, had actually wanted to accept a disciple. As for the candidate, it was naturally Shao Chun. Otherwise, why would his master pay attention to Shao Chun? Moreover, before his master had inadvertently revealed to Saint Huiyun and the other disciples that if he were to accept another disciple in this life, it would be his last disciple. Thinking about it, last disciple, who did that represent? It meant that he would inherit his master's legacy. Therefore, Huiyun Saint didn't think that Shao Chun wasn't worthy of Qin Shiru. On the contrary, Shao Chun and Qin Shiru were very compatible in Huiyun Saint's opinion. Moreover, others didn't know that there was still a Shao Sheng in Shao Chun's body. Although it was only a remnant soul now, Shao Sheng had helped Shao Chun a lot in terms of cultivation. Moreover, Shao Sheng was once recognized as the strongest saint in the Tianhe continent. Once Shao Sheng was resurrected, wouldn't the saints of the Tianhe continent tremble in the future? If he could be resurrected one day, wouldn't the saints of the Tianhe continent tremble? Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, it was impossible that Shao Chun wasn't worthy of Qin Shiru. It could only be said that the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect was somewhat ignorant and fearless. However, Shao Chun obviously wouldn't expose Shao Sheng's existence. Facing the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect, Shao Chun didn't get angry as expected, nor did he feel inferior. He wouldn't shrink back in the slightest. His expression was still calm as he looked indifferently at the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect. Senior, Shiru and I are husband and wife. As for whether I'm worthy of Shiru or not, I don't think this has anything to do with you, right? How could Shao Chun be discouraged just because of a few words? Confidence was given to him by himself. Even if he was facing a saint, Shao Chun would not look down on himself just because of a few words. Seeing that Shao Chun didn't intend to listen to his advice at all, the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect's face darkened. However, at the same time, Qin Shiru also spoke with a firm expression. Elder, I will make my own decisions regarding my own matters. Qin Shiru had no intention of backing down in the face of this elder of the Heavenly Sage sect. Of course, given Qin Shiru's status, he wouldn't be afraid of these saints because, just like the ancient sacred sect, many saints of the Heavenly Sage sect were actually disciples of the patriarch of the Heavenly Sage sect. Strictly speaking, Qin Shiru was their little junior sister. If Shao Chun really became Randang Koziai's last disciple one day, then Saint Huiyun, Saint Qin Ju, and the others would become Shao Chen senior brothers. Hearing Qin Shiru's words, the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect sighed helplessly and didn't say anything else. It could be seen that Qin Shiru didn't allow anyone to speak ill of Shao Chun. This little girl's heart was completely devoted to Shao Chun. Shaking his head, the saint of the Heavenly Sage sect said, "Forget it. This is your private matter. You can deal with it yourselves." Let's talk about the hegemony of the Hundred Spirits world. Obviously, he didn't care about the matter between Qin Shi and Xiao Chun. Moreover, even if he wanted to interfere, it would be Qin Shi's master, the patriarch of the Heavenly Sage sect. After all, Qin Shi was her disciple. The saint of the Heavenly Sage sect didn't say anything else. Therefore, although the Frost Python was angry, he couldn't do anything. He could only secretly decide that he would teach Xiao Chun a lesson after the hegemony of the Hundred Spirits world began. The matter seemed to be over, but people with discerning eyes knew that the matter between Xiao Chun and Qin Shi would probably be troublesome. At least, Qin Shi's master was a big problem. No longer caring about the saints of the four sects, the four of them began to prepare for the hegemony of the Hundred Spirits world. At this time, Qin Shi looked at Xiao Chun apologetically. Husband, actually, Master is very good to me, and I don't think she will stop us. He was worried that Xiao Chun would misunderstand her master. Hearing this, Xiao Chun naturally didn't think too much about it. However, just as Qin Shi finished speaking, Xiao Sheng's voice suddenly sounded. Boy, ask this little girl who her master is. Xiao Sheng seemed to have guessed something. Hearing this, Xiao Chun didn't refuse. She looked at Qin Shi and asked, Sure, what is your master's name? Hearing Xiao Chun ask about his master's name, Qin Shi didn't think too much about it and told Xiao Chun the truth. Qin Shi's master was called Ancient Sage Ice Lotus. Like Randang Cozy Eye, she was one of the oldest saints of the Tiana continent. After hearing Qin Shi's answer, Xiao Sheng and Xiao Chun's body fell silent for a long time. No matter how Xiao Chun called out, he didn't respond. Ancestor, hey, what's wrong with you? Can you hear me? Hey, Xiao Chun didn't know what was wrong with Xiao Sheng. Under Xiao Chun's calls, Xiao Sheng gradually revealed a smile and whispered softly, It really is her. I didn't expect that she had already become the ancestor of the Heavenly Sage sect. In that case, the ancestor of the Ancient Sage sect is probably that kid. Xiao Sheng seemed to have sunk into his memories. However, he didn't tell Xiao Chun about these things. Previously, he only felt that Qin Shi's aura was somewhat familiar. It should be because he cultivated some kind of cultivation technique. As expected, her master was indeed her. After sinking into his memories, Xiao Sheng felt that fate was playing tricks on him. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and say to Xiao Chun, Kid, don't worry. The ancestor will guarantee that the two of you will be together. Also, make a trip to the Heavenly Sage sect. I need a treasure for my resurrection. Only the Heavenly Sage sect has it. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 777. Hearing Xiao Sheng's inexplicable words, Xiao Chun was at a loss for a moment. He was in a daze just now and didn't respond no matter how he shouted, but now he said such a sentence. Hearing this, Xiao Chun said with some doubt, Old ancestor, are you all right? I'm fine, don't worry. Leave the matter between you and this little girl to me. Speaking of which, this little girl is also my Xiao clan's daughter-in-law. After the 100 Spirits Pool contest, you can cultivate here for 2 years. After that, we will go to the Heavenly Saint sect. There is a treasure there that the old ancestor is determined to obtain, Xiao Sheng said. The Heavenly Saint sect had a treasure that must be obtained. Hearing this, Xiao Chun didn't have any objections. However, if they wanted to obtain a treasure from the Heavenly Saint sect, and it was related to Xiao Chun's resurrection, it wouldn't be an ordinary treasure. So, would the Heavenly Saint sect give it to them? However, seeing Xiao Chun's solemn and helpless expression, Xiao Chun didn't ask any more questions. After all, there was a more important matter in front of him now, and that was the 100 Spirits Pool contest. He had been worried about Qin Shi before, and now he finally met him. Moreover, although Qin Shi had suffered some hardships these years, he also had a lot of opportunities, especially meeting the old ancestor of the Heavenly Saint sect. This could be said to be Qin Shi's luck. Looking at Qin Shi's current cultivation, he had actually reached the Tao Gate realm, which was only a small realm lower than him. It was really incredible. One had to know that the reason why Xiao Chun could reach the Tao Gate realm was because of the heavenly spirit pool. Xiao Chun was sure that even if the heavenly saint sect had the heavenly spirit pool, it was absolutely impossible for them to let Qin Shi use it alone. Even without the heavenly spiritual pond, Qin Shi's cultivation was actually not far behind his own. It could be seen that the heavenly sage sect's old ancestor valued Qin Shi a lot. Feng Lingye and the others, whose cultivation was almost the same back then, were now far behind Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun and Qin Shi relaxed and started chatting. The famous ice beauty of the heavenly sage sect was actually chatting with a man in such a relaxed manner. There was even a faint smile on her face. This was definitely the first time this had happened. Moreover, the only man in the world who could make Qin Shi smile was probably Xiao Chun. Inside Xiao Chun's body, Xiao Sheng watched the two chatting and sighed emotionally. Similar, really similar. Ice Lotus, this is probably why you took this little girl as your disciple, right? Xiao Chun didn't know what Xiao Sheng was thinking. After chatting for a while, he roughly learned about Qin Shi's experiences over the years. He also accidentally learned that Gudu Wuya and Lin Nuo were also in the Heaven Saints continent. Moreover, Gudu Wuya was already a personal disciple of the Heaven Saints sect. He asked if there was any news about the other rulers. Unfortunately, Qin Shi did not know where the other rulers were now. Thinking of the other rulers, Xiao Chun could not help but think of the Burning Sky ruler who had been with him in the Moonless Empire. Back then, the Burning Sky ruler had also said that he wanted to go out and gain experience. He wondered how he was doing now. On the other side, Fire Cloud Saint and the other saints of the four sacred sects were also preparing for the 100 Spirit World. Immediately, the four saints took out the talismans they had prepared and set up an extremely majestic talisman array in the 100 Spirit World. After the talisman array was set up, the four saints returned to their respective sections. At this moment, Qin Shi looked at Xiao Chun reluctantly. The 100 Spirit World was about to begin. Qin Shi should have returned to the Heavenly Sage Sect's camp. After all, she was a disciple of the Heavenly Sage Sect. Seeing Qin Shi's reluctance, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Silly girl, what are you thinking about? We can still be together in the 100 Spirit World. When the time comes, I'll help you get a few more spirit pools and make your master happy." Ha! He did not mind Qin Shi returning to the Heavenly Sage Sect's camp. It was not a life and death separation. Moreover, Xiao Chun could still team up with Qin Shi during the 100 Spirit World. Although the two of them came from different sects, Xiao Chun did not care about what others thought. Xiao Chun was a person who did not care about anything. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Qin Shi smiled and nodded. Then, she walked back to the Heavenly Sage Sect's camp. Of course, Qin Shi was not interested in the Heavenly Sage Sect's matters at all. She just wanted the 100 Spirit World to start as soon as possible so that she could team up with Xiao Chun to participate in the 100 Spirit World. As for the Spirit Pool, Qin Shi had long forgotten about it. After sending off Qin Shi, Fire Cloud Saint came to Xiao Chun. Not only him, but the other three disciples of the ancient sacred sect also followed behind Fire Cloud Saint. Seeing that Xiao Chun was still looking in the direction of the Heavenly Sage Sect's camp, Fire Cloud Saint said in annoyance, "Hey, stop looking." Hearing Fire Cloud Saint's words, Xiao Chun smiled and then looked away. At the same time, Fire Cloud Saint also told Xiao Chun and the others about the things to pay attention to in the 100 Spirit World battle. The 100 Spirit World battle naturally had its own rules, and these rules were jointly set by the four sacred sects. First, there was the talisman array that Fire Cloud Saint and the others had set up. This talisman array was a saint-level talisman array called the Soul Seal Saint Array. Its function was to duplicate the soul of a cultivator. In this Soul Seal Saint Array, even if one died in battle, one would not really die. This was also to allow the disciples of the four sacred sects to go all out. Moreover, every time the 100 Spirit World battle took place, there would be saints and prospective saints participating. Therefore, in order to prevent the deaths of saints and prospective saints, the Soul Seal Saint Array was not known. Otherwise, the four sacred sects would not be able to bear the loss of saints and prospective saints in the 100-spirit world battle every 10 years. With the Soul Seal Saint Array, everyone could go all out and fight without caring about life and death. Of course, if they were killed in the Soul Seal Saint Array, it meant that they had lost their qualification. This was one of the reasons. Secondly, once the 100-spirit world battle began, everyone from the four sacred sects would enter the Soul Seal Saint Array at the same time, and the 100 spiritual pools would be the object of everyone's competition. There were special spiritual flags. After the battle began, Shao Chun and the others had to snatch as many spiritual pools as possible. The way to snatch these spiritual pools was to insert the spiritual flags of their sacred sects. At the end of the battle, the spiritual flags would be used as the basis to divide the spiritual pools. As long as the spiritual flags were inserted, the spiritual pool would be yours. Of course, people from the other sacred sects would naturally come snatch it. Therefore, when the spiritual flags were inserted, they had to defend against the attacks of the other sacred sects. As for when the 100-spirit world battle would end, it would last for 5 days. After 5 days, the four sacred sects would use the spiritual flags to divide the spiritual pools. After explaining the rules in detail to Shao Chun and the others, Huiyun Saint deliberately looked at Shao Chun and said seriously, "Shao Chun, this time you're in charge of commanding, so your performance is very important. Don't be careless. After all, the 100-spirit world battle is not a challenge tournament. In addition to individual battle strength, the ability to cooperate as a team is also very important. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 778. Saint Huiyun reminded Shao Chun. As the commander, his task was obviously final. Not only did he have to do his job well, but he also had to think of ways to get more spiritual pools for the ancient sacred sect. Originally, in every 100-spirit world battle, the four sacred sects would have their saints and saintesses in charge. However, this time, the ancient sacred sect's saint was Emperor Qing. Moreover, he was here to help. In order to repay Chan Yu's favor, Emperor Qing bluntly said that he would not be the commander this time. He was only responsible for blocking the saints and saintesses of the other 3 sacred sects. Emperor Qing was not interested. After all, it was very tiring to be the commander. Therefore, this difficult task naturally fell on Shao Chun. As Saint Huiyun said, the Battle of the 100 Spirit Pool was different from the challenge tournament. It was not a matter of one's strength. Once the Battle of the 100 Spirit Pool began, the disciples of the 4 sacred sects would enter the Soul Seal Holy Array. Everyone would fight together. Although each side only sent out 5 disciples, it would be a battle between soldiers and generals. However, there were many things involved. First, they had to fight for the spiritual pools. Then, they had to protect the spiritual pools. In order to protect the spiritual pools, they naturally had to send out people to guard them. In this way, when they encountered other disciples of the holy sects, there would be a difference in numbers. Shao Chun had to think about how to avoid all of this, how to make the best use of everyone, and how to reduce the number of people on the other side. For example, if 2 core disciples met, it might be difficult to determine the winner. However, if a pro-disciple or an ordinary disciple joined in, the result would be completely different. Hearing Saint Huiyun's words, Shao Chun naturally knew the importance of being the commander. Shao Chun was originally not interested in the commander's position. However, in the current situation, it seemed that he could not refuse. He nodded helplessly. Seeing this, Saint Huiyun nodded faintly. "In that case, you should get ready. Enter the Soul Seal Holy Array in a quarter of an hour." After saying that, Saint Huiyun strode away. As Saint Huiyun left, the direct disciple of the ancient saint sect, standing on the right side of Shao Chun, snorted coldly. "Humph! What a joke! My ancient sacred sect actually let a prospective holy son be the commander, and the weakest prospective holy son at that." It was obvious that the personal disciple harbored great enmity towards Shao Chun as soon as he spoke. Shao Chun was not surprised by this. as this personal disciple was from the first sacred palace and was also one of Du Yi's men. There were a total of 5 direct disciples in the first sacred palace, and all 5 of them were Du Yi's subordinates. Of course, it was impossible to know whether they were loyal to Du Yi or if they had no other choice but to submit to him. However, it was undeniable that they were on Du Yi's side right now. Moreover, it was not only this direct disciple. The other ordinary disciple was clearly hostile towards him as well. This person should also be one of Du Yi's people. Among the 3 of them, only the core disciple was from the punishment hall and could be considered as one of Xiao Chen's people. For the sake of the 100 spirit world, Chen Yu naturally sent out the best disciples of their respective ranks. Therefore, even if he knew that these 2 were Du Yi's subordinates, there was nothing he could do. After all, he could not send out ordinary disciples, right? Otherwise, how could he compete with the other 3 divine sects? It was obvious that the 2 of them would not listen to him. However, since he was the commander, Xiao Chan naturally would not allow the 2 of them to ruin the plan. Therefore, after hearing the mockery and ridicule from the core disciple, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. He swept his gaze across the 2 of them and said indifferently, "The matter between Du Yi and me is a private matter. I hope that the 2 of you can understand the situation. I don't want any of you to disobey my orders in the 100 Spirit World competition. If any of you do, don't blame me for being rude. Believe me, I may not be able to deal with Du Yi, but I have 100 ways to deal with you in the first sacred palace. Don't doubt my words." Xiao Chan said bluntly. He did not care whether the 2 of them would listen to him or not. However, his request was very simple. During the 100 Spirit Pool competition, the 2 of them had to obey all his orders. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the 2 disciples' faces darkened. They looked at each other and saw a trace of fear in each other's eyes. In the end, it was the direct disciple who spoke coldly. "Candidate, don't worry. We know what's important and what's important. We will definitely do our best. However, if there's anything wrong with your orders, don't blame us for disobeying them." There was something wrong. Hearing the direct disciple's words, Xiao Chen's face turned cold. He stared at the direct disciple and said word by word, "I said absolute obedience." "What? You don't understand my words?" At this moment, an endless chill emerged from Xiao Chen's body. Hearing Xiao Chen's words and feeling the chill from Xiao Chen's body, the direct disciple was silent for a long time. In the end, he had no choice but to lower his head and speak. "I understand." It could be seen that the direct disciple was not convinced. However, it did not matter. Xiao Chen also wanted him to be convinced. As long as he obediently listened to him, it would be fine. He had successfully intimidated the 2 disciples. After a brief conversation, Xiao Chen learned their names. The personal disciple was Luo Dawei, and the ordinary disciple was Jiang Hua. As for the core disciple, because he was a member of the law enforcement hall, and because he was very strong among the core disciples, he could be considered a small celebrity in the law enforcement hall. Therefore, Xiao Chen knew that his name was Ding Tao. Luo Dawei, Ding Tao, and Jiang Hua. At the same time, Xiao Chen also knew that these 3 people could be said to be the strongest among the disciples of their respective levels. For example, Luo Dawei's strength was recognized as the strongest among the 5 direct disciples of the first sacred palace. It was precisely for this reason that Chen Yu sent him here. After all, the disciples sent by the other 3 sacred sects were also the best. Xiao Chen did not talk about any plans, nor did he pay attention to Luo Dawei and Jiang Hua. In any case, in Xiao Chen's view, after the 100 Spirit Domain battle, there would be no interaction between them. Even if there was, they would probably only be enemies. After all, the 2 of them were Du Yi's people. As for winning them over, to be honest, Xiao Chen really did not think about it, because it was too troublesome. Xiao Chen chatted with Ding Tao casually. While the 2 were chatting, from the Heavenly Sacred Sect and the Sacredine Sect, there were 2 pairs of eyes staring at Xiao Chen. Their eyes were filled with hatred. What was even more frightening was that the owners of these 2 gazes were actually the holy sons and holy daughters of the 2 sacred sections. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 779. Yunwan, the holy maiden of the Sacredine sect, and Han Meng, the holy son of the Heavenly Saints sect, were both staring coldly at Xiao Chun. Faint killing intent flashed in their eyes. Obviously, both of them wanted to kill Xiao Chun. It was not a good thing to be targeted by two holy sons and holy maidens at the same time. As if sensing another pair of eyes watching Xiao Chun, the two of them turned their heads to look at each other. At this moment, the Soul Seal Saint Array was finally ready. Under the summons of Saint Huiyun and the other disciples of the Four Sacred Sects, Xiao Chun and the other disciples of the Four Sacred Sects arrived before the four of them one after another. They were currently in the center of the 100 Spirit World, which was not covered by the Soul Seal Holy Array. The disciples of the Four Sacred Sects sat together and divided into four groups. With the help of the four saints, the disciples duplicated their souls and entered the Soul Seal Holy Array. The Soul Seal Holy Array cost a lot to engrave. Therefore, the Four Sacred Sects would only engrave it during the 100 Spirit Lake contest. The materials needed were naturally prepared by the Four Sacred Sects. His eyes were closed, and his body seemed to have lost consciousness. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the others seemed to have been teleported into the Soul Seal Holy Array. Emperor Qing, Luo Dawei, Ding Tao, Jiang Hua, and Xiao Chun appeared in the 100 Spirit World. Feeling the rich spiritual energy around them and looking at their bodies, Xiao Chun could not help but sigh at the power of the Soul Seal Holy Array. Without being separated, Xiao Chun looked at Luo Dawei and the other two. Then, he looked at Emperor Qing. Emperor Qing still looked indifferent. "Don't look at me. You're the commander. I'm only responsible for blocking the other holy sons and holy maidens. As for the other matters, you can deal with them yourselves." Xiao Chun was not surprised when he heard the Qing Emperor's words. From the beginning, he had felt that the Qing Emperor was not happy about participating in the 100 Spirits Pool contest. However, he did not know what method Chenyu had used to make the Qing Emperor unable to refuse. Emperor Qing was only responsible for stopping the holy sons and holy virgins of the other three holy sects. Xiao Chun did not say anything about this. In fact, this was enough. Now that the 100 Spirit Pool competition had begun, the first thing to do was to seize the spiritual pools. It was not difficult to find the spiritual pools in the 100 Spirit Realm. After all, each spiritual pool had a spiritual chi light pillar shooting up into the sky. As long as one looked at the light pillar, it was easy to find the spiritual pools. It was not difficult to find the spirit pool. The difficult part was how to guard it. Xiao Chun looked at the spirit energy light pillar closest to the group. Without much hesitation, he immediately led the group over. There shouldn't be any battle for the time being. After all, it had just begun. Moreover, Saint Huiyun had said that after everyone was sent into the Soul Seal Holy Array, they would be sent to the four directions of the 100 Spirit World according to their respective holy sects. In other words, it was unlikely that the four holy sects would meet each other. At the beginning, everyone's goal was to seize as many spiritual pools as possible. As for how many spiritual pools they could guard in the end, it would depend on their own abilities. All the way to the nearest spiritual pool, Emperor Qing followed Xiao Chun unhurriedly from the beginning to the end, as if he did not care about what was happening outside. The 100 Spirit World was not big, so it did not take long for Xiao Chun and the others to arrive at the first spiritual pool. Looking at the spiritual pool in front of them, there was not much difference between it and the spiritual pool he had seen in the Nine-Cloud Palace in the Heavenly Qin continent. However, the density of the spiritual chi was much higher. Compared to the ordinary spiritual pools, the spiritual pools in the 100 Spirit World were indeed stronger. It was no wonder that the four holy sects attached so much importance to it. I wonder who built the 100 Spirit World. It's indeed an unfathomable method. At the same time, Xiao Chun gave Ding Tao a look. Ding Tao knew what Xiao Chun meant. Seeing this, he strode forward and took out a palm-sized flag with an ancient word embroidered on it. He threw the chess piece directly into the spiritual pool. Then everyone saw that the flag did not sink into the spiritual pool. Instead, it floated in the middle of the spiritual pool, about half a meter above the ground. Obviously, this flag was specially made for the 100 Spirit World. After the flag was successfully inserted, the light blue spiritual chi pillars turned green. Not only Shao Chun and the others, but in the other 3 directions of the 100 Spirit World, the color of the spiritual chi pillars changed. Red, gold, and white. Looking at the 3 spiritual chi pillars that changed, Shao Chun said indifferently, "Once the flag is inserted, the color of the pillars will change." He didn't expect there to be such a setting. At the same time, Ding Tao explained to Shao Chun that the red color represented the Sun Saint clan, the gold color represented the Heavenly Saint clan, the white color represented the Sacred clan, and the green color represented the Ancient Saint clan. Through the color, one could determine the number and location of the spiritual pools. After hearing Ding Tao's explanation, Shao Chun quickly understood that during the 100 Spirit World battle, it was impossible to hide and stall for time. This was because through various means, it was impossible to hide the number and location of the spiritual pools. Once the opponents knew about this, they would definitely swarm over. The 4 holy sects stood in the 4 directions of the 100 Spirit World. They looked at their right hand, where there was a gold pillar soaring into the sky. This meant that the Heavenly Saint sect was in this direction. Without thinking too much, Shao Chun directly led the team in the direction of the Heavenly Saint sect. Of course, along the way, they naturally did not forget to seize the spiritual pools. The reason why they were approaching the Heavenly Saint sect was naturally because of Qin Shiru. In Shao Chun's heart, he did not care whether Qin Shiru was a disciple of the Heavenly Saint sect or not. In any case, Shao Chun hoped that Qin Shiru could follow him. The reason why he wanted to find Qin Shiru was that simple. As for the Heavenly Saint sect, Shao Chun did not care about it. As time passed, Shao Chun and the others seized more and more spiritual pools. Not only them, but the other 3 holy sects also did the same. The original light blue spiritual chi pillars gradually changed into 4 colors. The number was almost the same. In just 2 hours, the number of green light pillars representing the Ancient Saint sect had reached 18. There were also more than a dozen gold, red, and white light pillars. The original blue light pillars were less than half left. As for the changes in the color of the light pillars, Saint Huiyun and the others, who were outside the formation, did not care too much. This was just the beginning. The number of spiritual pools seized at this time did not count at all. The most important thing was to wait until the disciples of the 4 holy sects began to compete with each other. Whether they could hold on to the spiritual pools was the most important thing. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 780. This was only the beginning of the battle for the 100 Spirit Realm. The 4 sacred sects were still fighting for the ownerless spiritual pools. Once these spiritual pools were all occupied, the battle for the 100 Spirit Pool would truly begin. As they approached the Heavenly Saint sect, the change in color of the light pillars made it impossible for the disciples of the various sects to hide. Unless they planned to give up on the spiritual pools, it was naturally impossible for them to hide. More and more light blue light pillars began to change color. After 4 hours, Shao Chun and the others had already occupied 23 spiritual pools. At the same time, they finally arrived at the area where the Heavenly Saint sect was. At this time, Shao Chun and the others were surrounded by spiritual chi light pillars that emitted golden light. Their faces were calm. As for how to find Qin Shiru, Shao Chun already had a plan. As long as they found a spiritual pool, the people of the Heavenly Saint sect would naturally appear. Looking at the spiritual pool closest to them, Shao Chun led his people and rushed over without saying a word. Seeing this, the Azure Emperor curled his lips slightly. Without saying anything, he followed Shao Chun. No one objected. Of course, Luo Dawei and Zhang Hua were definitely unhappy. However, after being intimidated by Shao Chun, they did not dare to show it. After a few leaps, Xiao Chun arrived in front of the spiritual pool that already belonged to the heavenly saint sect. Looking at the spiritual pool, Xiao Chun said to Ding Tao, "Go, take it." He wanted to take this spiritual pool. Hearing this, Ding Tao nodded and stepped in front of the spiritual pool. With a wave of his hand, a small flag shot into the air above the spiritual pool. Originally, there was already a small flag above the spiritual pool. However, as the ancient sacred sect's flag appeared, the small flag that belonged to the heavenly saint sect began to spin rapidly. The battle for the ownership of the spiritual pool was actually just a change of color in the small flag. The whole process would last for about 100 breaths of time. If someone interrupted him during the 100 breaths of time, then he would have failed and would have to start from the beginning. If he was not interrupted, then he would have a new owner. Of course, if someone tried to snatch the spiritual pool, the other party would be able to sense it through the small flag. Just like now, Xiao Chen had asked Ding Tao to snatch the spiritual pool. As the ancient saint sect's small flag arrived above the spiritual pool, Frost Python and the others' expressions changed. Frost Python said coldly, "Someone is stealing our spiritual pool. Quick, let's go." They sensed it immediately, and the Frost Python led its men to the spiritual pool where Xiao Chun and the others were. At the same time, the spiritual pool, which was originally shining with a golden light, gradually had a green light. As time passed, the green light became more and more intense. Once the spirit chi completely turned into green light, it meant that the spirit pool had changed owners. As for the small flag of the Heavenly Saint sect, it would return to the hands of the Heavenly Saint sect's disciple. The cyan light grew denser and denser. Just as the golden and cyan light were about to clash, an angry roar was heard. "Xiao Chun, it's you again!" Frost Python had arrived. Along with the angry roar, Frost Python appeared in front of Xiao Chun and the others with Qin Shi and 4 other disciples of the Heavenly Saint sect. Frost Python glared at Xiao Chun as if it was going to spit fire. In Frost Python's eyes, a prospective holy sun was an existence that it could easily crush. However, Xiao Chun provoked it again and again. This made Frost Python so angry that it was on the verge of exploding. However, in the face of Frost Python's anger, Xiao Chun did not care at all. Her eyes fell directly on Qin Shi. Before Xiao Chun could speak, Qin Shi had already taken the initiative to come to Xiao Chen's side and called out softly, "Husband." They had already agreed to be together after the Battle of 100 Spirits Pool began. Xiao Chun did not care about the Heavenly Saint sect or the Ancient Saint sect. Qin Shi naturally did not care either. Moreover, with Qin Shi's status in the Heavenly Saint sect, he was not afraid of being punished at all. Other than her master, who was the patriarch of the Heavenly Saint sect, no one in the Heavenly Saint sect could punish Qin Shi. Seeing that Qin Shi chose to stand aside without hesitation and went directly to Xiao Chen's side, Frost Python was even more furious. The corners of its eyes twitched unconsciously, as if a gush of anger was about to shoot out from its heart. It stared coldly at Xiao Chun, then turned to Qin Shi and said, "Junior sister, do you know what you are doing?" Ever since Xiao Chun appeared, Frost Python could not accept all of Qin Shi's actions. A famous ice beauty in the Heavenly Saint sect had actually revealed her timid side in front of this man. This made Frost Python feel like King a dog. Because of the increasing anger in its heart, Frost Python's tone towards Qin Shi became more and more unfriendly. However, Qin Shi did not care about this at all. He said coldly, "It's none of your business. Go ahead and complain." He did not give Frost Python any face at all. Seeing this, Frost Python's anger also turned to Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Xiao Chun smiled faintly and looked at Emperor Qing beside him. "Senior brother Emperor Qing, can you stop Frost Python? They are now 1 person short. I want to send the people from the Heavenly Saint sect away first." Heavenly Saint sect was 1 person short. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Frost Python's mouth twitched unconsciously. Suddenly, Frost Python felt that Xiao Chun was simply too shameless. Not to mention that he had abducted Qin Shi. That's right, in Frost Python's eyes, Qin Shiru was abducted by Shao Chun. Now, Frost Python even wanted to take this opportunity to wipe out the people from the Heavenly Saint sect. Frost Python did not doubt Shao Chen's words at all. At the same time, he was also very clear that Qin Shiru would definitely not take action, nor would he care about the feelings of being from the same sect. He finally realized that in Qin Shiru's heart, the entire Heavenly Saint sect was probably not as good as Shao Chun. Therefore, if Shao Chun wanted to take action against the Heavenly Saint sect, Qin Shiru would definitely not help. He might even turn the tables and help Shao Chun. 4 against 5, and the difference was a personal disciple. There was absolutely no chance of winning. Furthermore, Frost Python did not have the slightest confidence to face Emperor Qing. It could even be said that Frost Python would definitely lose if they fought. His face was extremely gloomy. At the same time, hearing Shao Chen's words, Emperor Qing laughed and said, "This is indeed an opportunity. Don't worry, just leave Frost Python to me. Not to mention stopping him. I can even send him on his way." Emperor Qing's words were very domineering. Hearing this, Shao Chen's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. Shao Chun had just thought of this idea. Since Qin Shiru had left, the Heavenly Saint sect would have one less personal disciple. Wasn't this a good opportunity to wipe out the Heavenly Saint sect? As for the Heavenly Saint sect's spiritual pool, Shao Chun would naturally give it to Qin Shiru. Looking at Frost Python and the other 3 people, Shao Chun had already decided to take action. However, to Shao Chen's surprise, Frost Python roared without hesitation. "Let's go." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 781. Originally, Shao Chun wanted to kill him while he was down. However, who would have thought that Frost Python, the holy son of the Heavenly Sage sect, would choose to run away without any hesitation? He did not even care about the spiritual pool in front of him. Without any hesitation, Frost Python turned around and ran away. At the same time, the other 3 disciples of the Heavenly Sage sect also turned around and ran away. Seeing this, Shao Chun was stunned at first. Then, he naturally led his people to chase after them. Unfortunately, Frost Python and the other 3 were determined to run away. They had no intention of chasing after Shao Chun and the others. After running for a few miles, Shao Chun finally chose to give up when he realized that it would be difficult to catch up with Frost Python and the other 3 for a while. Seeing Frost Python and the other 3 disappear from his sight, Shao Chun sighed inwardly. "Looks like I can't underestimate him. Although he's a little annoying, he's really good in other aspects." Frost Python turned around and ran away without any hesitation. Shao Chun did not think that this was a shameful behavior. On the contrary, if Frost Python had braced himself to stay and fight with them, Shao Chun would have looked down on him even more. The reason was simple. Knowing that there was no chance of winning, he still forced himself to fight. This was not bravery, but stupidity. Many people, especially those who thought they were of noble status, would often do stupid things for the sake of face that they didn't need, even though they knew they shouldn't do it. And this kind of result was usually seeking one's own death. However, Frost Python was different. Knowing that he was no match for them, he made the wisest choice. He did not care about his identity as the Holy Sun and his so-called face. Perhaps in the hearts of Frost Python. No, in the hearts of the holy sons and holy daughters of the Tiana continent, their face was not something that could be thrown away just because of one escape. Even a 3-year-old child knew this principle. However, as people grew older, they gradually forgot this simple principle. Everyone stopped chasing. Just like Shao Chun, Emperor Qing did not despise the Frost Python for escaping. He only said calmly, "This fellow is still the same as before. Shao Chun, you have to be careful from now on. The Frost Python is very vengeful. I'm afraid it will keep its eyes on you from now on." Hearing this, Shao Chun smiled non-committally. "Even if this didn't happen, I don't think you would let me go, right?" Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, the Qing Emperor glanced at Qin Shiru and laughed heartily. "That's right. Even if this didn't happen, the frost python wouldn't let Xiao Chen off so easily. Hence, it didn't matter. He was indeed a little disappointed that he couldn't take the opportunity to get rid of the frost python. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, the frost python was a saint. It would be strange if he could get rid of him so easily. Xiao Chen looked in the direction where the frost python and the other three escaped. That was where the sacred insect was located. Vaguely, he had a bad feeling. However, he did not say anything and turned to Luo Dawei, Ding Tao, and Jianghua. Let's go back and find the people from the Sacred Sun sect. Go back and find the people from the Sacred Sun sect? Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Luo Dawei immediately said angrily, "Prospective saint, what do you mean? Now that the people from the Sacred Sun sect have escaped, it's a good opportunity for us to snatch the spiritual pool. Why do we have to go back? Do you want to leave the spiritual pool to this woman? Now is a good opportunity to snatch the spiritual pool from the Sacred Sun sect." However, Xiao Chen did not do so. Luo Dawei naturally guessed that Xiao Chen wanted to leave the spiritual pool to Qin Shiru. Hence, he did not snatch it. Jianghua also said coldly, "Prospective saint, don't forget your identity. You are a disciple of the ancient Sacred Sun sect." The two could be said to be echoing each other. Hearing this, Xiao Chen's face darkened. "Who are you to tell me what to do? Moreover, even if we snatch the spiritual pool, the frost python will not be able to withstand it. The frost python has already escaped to the sacred insect." Xiao Chen did have the intention to share the spiritual pool with Qin Shiru. After all, Qin Shiru was his woman. Xiao Chen did not want her to bear too much pressure in the Sacred Sun sect. Of course, the main reason why he turned around and left now was because he could not hold on to the spiritual pool. The frost python ran towards the disciples of the sacred insect. Don't forget that the sacred insect's holy maiden, Yun Luan, also had quite a bit of killing intent towards him. With the two of them together, what do you think would happen? Precisely because he could not hold on to the spiritual pool, Xiao Chen did not want to waste time and avoided them. Regardless of whether Luo Dawei and Jianghua understood his meaning, Xiao Chen pulled Qin Shiru and left first. Seeing this, Ding Tao naturally followed closely behind. The Qing Emperor looked in the direction that the frost python and the other three had fled and followed with a faint smile. In the end, Luo Dawei and Jianghua's faces turned ugly. However, they had no choice but to follow Xiao Chen's orders. Xiao Chen left with his people and did not try to snatch the spiritual pool of the sacred insect. At the same time, the frost python and the others who were running all the way met the disciples of the sacred insect, led by Yun Luan. When the disciples of the two sects met by chance, both sides immediately became nervous. When Yun Luan saw that there were only 4 people from the sacred insect, the look in her eyes became unfriendly. The battle for the 100 Spirits pool had just begun, and the sacred insect had already lost 1 person. No matter what the reason was, this was definitely a great opportunity. Sensing the change in Yun Luan's expression, the frost python's face darkened. However, he still said patiently, "Yun Luan, wait a moment." It was a sign of weakness. Hearing this, Yun Luan said indifferently, "What? You, the frost python, still want to beg for mercy?" "Haha, Yun Luan, you think too much. I, the frost python, will not go so far as to beg for mercy. Moreover, if we really fight, you won't have any advantage. What I mean is that we should join forces. What do you think?" The frost python laughed. Qin Shiru's departure caused the sacred insect to lose 1 person. With such a lineup, the sacred insect would definitely be in a passive position, let alone find Xiao Chen. Therefore, when the frost python met Yun Luan, he immediately thought of joining forces with her. After all, the frost python could tell from Yun Luan's gaze that she had a murderous intent toward Xiao Chen. Hearing the frost python's words, Yun Luan laughed. "Join forces? Frost python, do you think I will agree? You will, because we have a common enemy. Only if we join forces will we have a chance to teach Xiao Chen a lesson. Yun Luan, think carefully. The ancient sacred insect sent Emperor Qing this time. In a one-on-one battle, no matter if it's you or me. Who is Emperor Qing's opponent? The Frost Python said. He was confident that Yin Luan would definitely agree because both of them hated Xiao Chun. Since they had a common enemy, it would be easy for them to reach a consensus. Hearing this, Yin Luan pondered for a moment before saying unhurriedly, "What you said makes sense. However, we can't kill him in the Soul Seal Sacred Array. At most, we can teach him a lesson. What can I gain by joining forces with you? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 782. There were only 4 people from the Heavenly Saints sect, so the Sacred Ean sect naturally had the upper hand. Hearing Yin Luan's words, a cold glint flashed across Han Python's eyes. This woman actually still wanted benefits. Han Python was very unhappy, but there was nothing he could do. He could only take a step back and say, "After defeating the Ancient Saints sect, I only want 25 spiritual pools. The rest is all yours." There were a total of 100 spiritual pools in the entire 100 Spirit Realm. If they defeated the Ancient Saints sect and the Frost Python only asked for 25 spiritual pools, then the Sacred Ean sect would need at least 30 spiritual pools. After all, the remaining Sacred Sun sect would not be able to take so many spiritual pools. There was nothing he could do about giving up his own benefits. Hearing Han Python's answer, Yin Luan smiled and said, "Deal." They had a common enemy, and Han Python had also made a concession. What reason did Yin Luan have to refuse? Just like that, the Sacred Ean sect and the Heavenly Saints sect came together. Xiao Chun had already guessed this. Otherwise, he would not have led his people back to the Sun Saints sect instead of snatching the spiritual pools from the Heavenly Saints sect. It had already been said before that the struggle for hegemony in the 100 Spirits realm did not only rely on strength. You could use all kinds of methods. Now, facing the alliance of the Sacred Ean sect and the Heavenly Saints sect, the only way Xiao Chun could think of was to find the Sun Saints sect. The Sun Saints sect's holy son, Yin Xiong, probably did not want to see the Sacred Ean sect and the Heavenly Saints sect join forces. After all, although the first target of their alliance was definitely the Ancient Saints sect, what would happen after they destroyed the Ancient Saints sect? Could the Sun Saints sect resist the alliance of the two sides? As the saying goes, if the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. Yin Xiong should understand this. Along the way, Emperor Qing had already guessed what Xiao Chun was thinking, but he did not say anything. Anyway, in Emperor Qing's opinion, he was only responsible for the holy sons and holy daughters. Other things had nothing to do with him. Very quickly, they left the Heavenly Saints sect's territory and returned to their original location. The spiritual pool in this area had already been kept by Xiao Chun and the others. The spiritual energy light pillars that could be seen in the surroundings were all green in color. Crossing this area, Xiao Chun led the group to the place where the Sun Saints sect was located. Similarly, the spiritual pool in this area had long been taken by the Sun Saints sect, and the spiritual chi light pillars had all turned bright red. To be honest, Xiao Chun did not have much confidence in joining forces with the Sun Saint clan, but there was no other way. It was the only way now. Xiao Chun was not so arrogant as to fight against 2 sacred sects at the same time. Just as he was thinking about how to communicate with the Sun Saint sect's holy son, Yin Xiong, a hearty laugh rang out. "Ha ha, Emperor Qing, I didn't expect to meet you first. Let's fight." The voice was very rough. Hearing it, Xiao Chun knew who it was without looking. It was the disciples of the Sun Saints sect, led by Yin Xiong. As soon as the voice fell, the burly Yin Xiong had already appeared in front of Xiao Chun and the others. On his left and right, there were 4 disciples of the Sun Saints sect. However, when Yin Xiong saw Qin Shiru standing beside Xiao Chun, he frowned slightly. He didn't expect the people of the Heavenly Saints sect to ally with the Ancient Saints sect. With the addition of Qin Shiru, the number of people on Xiao Chen's side was 1 more than that of the Sun Saints sect. However, Yin Xiong was not the Frost Python after all. This guy was a battle maniac, and he had already expressed his desire to fight with Emperor Qing. Therefore, after seeing Qin Shu, Yin Xiong's expression didn't change much. It could even be said that he didn't care at all. He once again focused on Emperor Qing and laughed loudly. "Emperor Qing, let's fight." He still wanted to fight. Hearing this, Emperor Qing ignored him and turned to look at Xiao Chun, saying indifferently, "This guy is different from the frost python. He doesn't care about the spiritual pool at all. If you want him to agree, this battle is inevitable." After saying this, without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Emperor Qing took the initiative to soar into the sky. Seeing this, Yin Xiong also chased after him without hesitation. Then, the two began to fight in the sky. Yin Xiong didn't care about the 4 disciples of the Sun Saint sect at all. In his eyes, there was only the battle with Emperor Qing. As the saints of the two sides left and a fierce battle broke out, the 4 disciples of the Sun Saint sect faced the 5 people on Xiao Chen's side with an ugly expression. The man in the lead even smiled helplessly. "I know that every time senior brother Yin Xiong comes, nothing good will happen." With that, the disciple took a step forward and looked at Xiao Chun, who was wearing an ancient robe, and said, "Senior brother, I am Zhao Hefeng, the prospective saint of the Sun Saint sect." He took the initiative to report his name. Seeing this, Xiao Chun also returned the greeting. Xiao Chun of the Ancient Saint sect. Originally, they were here to discuss cooperation with the Sun Saint sect, so Xiao Chun didn't mean to become enemies with them. Since Zhao Hefeng was so polite, Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't offend him. They already had 2 great enemies, the Heavenly Saint sect and the Sacredine sect. If they also offended the Sun Saint sect, then the Ancient Saint sect wouldn't be able to survive this time. They might as well surrender. Their attitudes were strangely peaceful, and there was no hostility between the two sides. After reporting each other's names, Xiao Chun spoke first. "Actually, this time I want to discuss some cooperation with the Sun Saint sect, but looking at senior brother Yin Xiong, it seems that he won't calm down without a fight." Xiao Chun did not hide his intentions and spoke frankly. After he finished speaking, he raised his head and looked at Emperor Qing and Yin Xiong, who were fighting fiercely. At this time, 2 balls of light, one green and one red, were constantly colliding with each other in the sky. Each collision carried a terrifying residual power and momentum, which was indeed very eye-catching. Needless to say, these 2 balls of light were the Azure Emperor and Yin Xiong. At this time, the two were engaged in a fierce battle. Yin Xiong was especially excited to the extreme. He was indeed a veritable battle maniac, a bit like the 3rd saint child of the Ancient Saints sect, Hu Fei. After all, Hu Fei was also a battle maniac. However, Xiao Chun felt that Yin Xiong was even more exaggerated than Hu Fei. It was as if in Yin Xiong's eyes, outside of battle, everything else was just fleeting clouds, not worth mentioning. Xiao Chun looked at the battle in the sky. At the same time, Zhao Hefeng did the same. However, after a quick glance, Zhao Hefeng withdrew his gaze and looked at Xiao Chun again with a smile. "Brother Xiao, please forgive him. Senior brother Yin Xiong has such a temper. However, Brother Xiao just said that you want to talk about cooperation, but before that, I have a presumptuous request. I hope that Brother Xiao can agree to it." Zhao Hefeng said indifferently. However, as soon as he finished speaking, his body exuded a faint battle intent. Feeling this battle intent, Xiao Chun shook his head and sighed. "Well, it's like family doesn't enter the same house. A saint child and a quasi-saint are all the same. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 783. Zhao Hefeng and Yin Xiong both came from the same sacred palace. Just like Xiao Chun and Chunyu, the two could be said to have a close relationship. However, compared to Yin Xiong, Zhao Hefeng gave off a gentle and refined feeling. Yin Xiong, on the other hand, was obviously a simple-minded guy with brawn. However, since the two of them could be together, just as Xiao Chun said, they were like family. Zhao Hefeng was actually a battle maniac, so when he saw Xiao Chun, Zhao Huffeng's battle intent had already risen. Zhao Huffeng didn't care what Xiao Chun wanted to talk about. He just wanted to fight Xiao Chun. Feeling the faint battle intent from Zhao Huffeng, Xiao Chun smiled bitterly and nodded. How does brother Zhao want to fight? Together or just the two of us? There's no need for the others. Just me and brother Xiao. As a quasi-holy son, I'm very curious about brother Zhao's strength. Zhao Huffeng replied without even thinking. Zhao Huffeng knew that the ancient sacred sect had more people on their side, so they had no chance of winning in a group battle. Hence, Zhao Huffeng proposed a one-on-one battle. Xiao Chun did not reject the proposal, but at the same time, he secretly told Xiao Sheng, "Old ancestor, it seems that I have to rely on you again." Zhao Huffeng seems to be stronger than Mu Yao of the Sacredine sect. Xiao Chun had no choice but to ask Xiao Sheng to help. With his current strength, he wasn't a match for these quasi-holy sons and holy daughters. Xiao Chun's intuition told him that Zhao Huffeng was stronger than Mu Yao, the saintess candidate of the Sacredine sect. This was to be expected. Mu Yao was ranked among the saintesses of the Sacredine sect, while Zhao Huffeng was ranked third among the saintesses of the Sacred Sun sect. It was understandable that he was stronger than Mu Yao. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Xiao Sheng said snappily, "Kid, you have to catch up with the other quasi-holy sons and holy daughters in the next 2 years." Although Xiao Chun was now ranked as the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect, he had to rely on Xiao Sheng's strength every time he fought with the other quasi-holy sons and holy daughters. Not to mention the consumption of Xiao Sheng's strength. Xiao Chun himself didn't benefit at all. Once Xiao Chun developed a habit of relying on others, it would be detrimental to Xiao Chun's cultivation. Xiao Chun was naturally aware of this. That was why he wasn't happy at all, even though he had captured Mu Yao alive. After all, it wasn't his doing, but there was nothing he could do about it. After all, he had become the candidate ahead of time. If Xiao Chun was a pro-disciple at this time, Xiao Chun could say that he was not afraid of anyone. But there was no other choice. Xiao Chun was now the fifth quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect, so his opponents could only be the other quasi-holy sons and quasi-holy daughters. If he wanted to deal with a pro-disciple, it would be bullying the weak. He had to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. He must make good use of the next 2 years. But now is not the time to talk about this. The most important thing was to deal with the 100 Spirits pool competition with all his strength. After all, Saint Huiyun had said that if he couldn't fulfill his request, the previous promise would be invalid. Seeing Xiao Chun nod, the 3 disciples of the Sacred Sun sect behind Zhao Huffeng consciously chose to retreat. At the same time, the people of the ancient sacred sect also did the same. However, Luo Dawei and Jianghua couldn't help sneering in their hearts. Xiao Chun, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You actually dare to fight with Zhao Huffeng. Do you know that Zhao Huffeng's strength is above senior brother Du Yi? You are simply courting death. Zhao Huffeng's strength was stronger than Du Yi, and Xiao Chun's cultivation was only at the initial Dao Gate realm. He was simply courting death. Not knowing what Luo Dawei and Jianghua were thinking, Qin Shuru said to Xiao Chun softly, "Be careful. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. It's okay." Hearing this, Xiao Chun also replied with a smile. Everyone consciously moved away, giving the space to Xiao Chun and Zhao Huffeng. At the same time, the battle intent on Zhao Huffeng's body became more and more intense. His eyes were fixed on Xiao Chun, as if he had become a different person. He said with a serious expression, "Brother Xiao, I'm very curious. How did you become the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect with your initial Dao Gate realm cultivation? Do you think that I'm too weak to be your opponent?" Hearing this, Xiao Chun said lightly, "No, I believe in the vision of the ancient sacred sect saints. Since you can become the quasi-holy son, you must have something extraordinary. Moreover, it's precisely because of my curiosity that I want to fight with you." Zhao Huffeng replied. He didn't mean to look down on Xiao Chun, but he was curious about how Xiao Chun became the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect with his initial Dao Gate realm cultivation. As Zhao Huffeng's voice fell, the aura on Xiao Qin's body suddenly burst out, and he instantly rose from the Dao Gate realm to the Dao Gate realm. Of course, others didn't know that this power didn't come from Xiao Chun, but from Xiao Sheng. With the sudden rise of his cultivation, a surge of sword intent of the great accomplishment realm also soared into the sky. With the help of the Herb of Will, Xiao Qin's sword intent also broke through to the great accomplishment realm. Feeling Xiao Qin's violent aura at this time, a strange look flashed across Zhao Hufeng's eyes. At the same time, the battle intent in his heart soared, and he said excitedly, "You really do have something extraordinary. This is interesting. Brother Xiao, come on." Saying that, Zhao Hufeng took the lead to attack. The storage ring in his hand flashed, and a large saber appeared in his hand. His aura soared into the sky, and he slashed at Xiao Chun. Feeling an extremely violent aura from Zhao Hufeng's body, Xiao Chun didn't hesitate. The black dragon sword also appeared in his hand in an instant. He slashed out with the sword, and the sword chi swept out. The two attacks immediately collided fiercely. Zhao Hufeng's attack was simple and violent, but Xiao Sheng, also changed from his usual agile sword to a straightforward one, constantly colliding with Zhao Hufeng's attack. The momentum of the battle between the two prospective holy sons was obviously far inferior to the battle between holy sons. However, in the eyes of the direct disciples and core disciples, it was still extremely shocking. Looking at the fierce battle between the two, the direct disciple of the Sun Saint sect couldn't help but whisper at this time, "So strong. How can Xiao Chun be so strong? It shouldn't be." Hearing this, the core disciple of the Sun Saint sect asked curiously, "Senior brother, Xiao Chun is the prospective holy son of the ancient saint sect. It shouldn't be a big deal for him to have this kind of strength. Why do you say that?" Xiao Chun and Zhao Hufeng clashed head-on. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged dozens of blows. Xiao Chun did not seem to be at a disadvantage. The direct disciple who had spoken earlier had been observing the battle between the two when he heard the doubts of the core disciple. He replied somewhat impatiently, "You don't understand. When you go back and inquire about Xiao Chen's deeds, you'll know. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.